I rarely have to gavel a room quiet that's already quiet. But it is kind of a call to order either way. And from my perspective, a call to action, which I think most people in this room probably share. I'm going to make a few announcements, and then I'm going to make a few remarks, and our gun violence prevention working group co-chair, Senator Zainab Mohammed, will make a few remarks as well. And Senator Draham, I think you're the most senior member of the, or do you have someone designated to make some opening remarks? Senator Howe? All right, and then Senator Howe can make some opening remarks, and then we'll go into member presentations of proposals. We will be taking a brief recess in the middle. 3 hours is a long time just to sit here. I'm anticipating it's going to be a difficult hearing to be a part of as well, so I think it'll be good for us to take a little recess in the middle. This Gun Violence Prevention Working Group is not an official body of the State Senate. It's an ad hoc creation. It's not defined by statute or at the directive of any legislative proposal. We intend to conduct meetings with respect and in conformance with Senate rules, but no quorum is necessary and no official action can be taken. All documents that have been provided are supplemental and could appear differently during any special or during regular session. During this hearing, quiet must be maintained throughout the committee room. Verbal discussion should occur outside of the committee hearing room. If you'd like to have a conversation, you are welcome to step outside and then re-enter whenever you wish. All presentations, discussions, and questions must go through and be recognized by the chair as we do in regular committee hearings. Signs, noise, or demonstrations that disrupt the committee's work may result in removal from the hearing room. Our goal here is to set a tone of respect and honor for those who are testifying, for those who are participating, for those who are watching here in the room or on media outlets, and for the members who are here who will be listening and learning about particular proposals as well. I don't think any of us wanted to be here. We're here because of another firearm tragedy in Minnesota. It's been a tough summer for Minnesotans and, of course, in other parts of the country as well. And it shouldn't need to be said, but I will say it. There is no place for violence in our political society. No violence directed against officials, no violence directed against unelected employees of the government, no violence elected or against people who are engaged in public discourse, no matter how much one would disagree with what they say. The remedy is more speech, responsive speech, not political violence of any sort, certainly not with the deadliest form of political violence, with firearms. And, of course, no political violence against our children, in our schools, in our places of worship. Minnesota has had in its history, unfortunately, even long before this summer, a bit of a history in terms of school shootings with Red Lake and Ricori. Probably every one of us here at the table have, in one form or another, been subjected to not only hate speech, but threats of violence, if not direct violence. My first month on the city council, I got a death threat on my voicemail because of action we were planning to take with regard to the deer population. Speaking of children. And I've been the subject of targeted efforts within the Senate chambers after we left, after we had adjourned for a day 10 years ago. Received voicemails at home in connection with gun control legislation that I was advocating for. And of course, my family knows about that, hears about that too. Every one of us probably has stories to tell. I think it's really, really important for those of us with public voices to try to tone down the rhetoric, to try to stay on the merits of proposals and make our impassioned pleas for why proposals are needed. But when we border on hate speech begets hate action. We have to be really careful what we say. For this working group, we invited proposals from all members of the Senate who wish to have a proposal heard. What we have on the agenda today is made up of what we received. It certainly is not the entire universe of proposals for reducing gun violence in Minnesota, and the conversation will certainly continue beyond today's hearing. With that said, I'd like to invite my co-chair, Senator Zainab Mohammed, to make some remarks.
Thank you, Chair Latz. Good morning, everyone. I'm Senator Zainab Mohammed. I represent District 63 in South Minneapolis, and my district includes Annunciation School and Church. Students, parents, and educators in that community who suffered the horrific acts of gun violence were my constituents, and I am proud to represent them every day, but especially today. Yesterday, our community gathered to celebrate the life of Harbor, the 10-year-old who was killed in Annunciation Church 1 month ago. And last week, we gathered to celebrate the life of Fletcher, the 8-year-old who was also killed in that same tragedy. We mourn their losses and will continue to do what we can to support these families. This generation is the first in American history where mass shootings have become so normalized that we run drills to practice for what happens when that occurs in our schools. The number of school shootings in America used to be few per year. Now it's few a week. Beyond the schools, mass shootings in other settings have multiplied 100-fold. If any other public health issue was growing this fast, killing this many people, we would treat it the crisis it is. And some of us will. We have common sense solutions to prevent these events, and we'll hear them throughout the day. But I will be clear on my position, and I will say we have one of the most simplest and most effective bills coming forward, banning assault weapons and high-capacity magazines. In the 10 years that this law has existed nationwide, mass shootings fatalities decreased by 70%. And since their return, assault weapons have been used in 85% of shootings that have killed 4 or more people. We've had these laws before. 10 other states have it. And there are also going to be a number of other legislations coming forward from Senator Latz and other members. And as we hear and debate today, I just want us to remember why we're here and why we've gathered here and what happened to not just our community, but what happened to members of our own body, and the fact that we will go into another legislative session without some of those members because of these types of guns. And so thank you, Chair Latz, for gathering us today.
Thank you, Senator Mohammed. Senator Howe.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Chair Latch. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I represent District 13, which wraps around St. Cloud and includes the Ricori School District. My son was in the hallway when that school shooting happened. My son's teacher that day was a substitute teacher who didn't really have the knowledge to do the lockdown drill. My son is the one that locked down that school. Not the school, but that school classroom. So, and when I was on active duty with the National Guard when that happened, almost 20 years ago, and that, not knowing whether that was one of those individuals shot was your child or not, was nerve-wracking. Calling their cell phone, not getting an answer. So on Saturday, I actually toured a school that has been hardened. In fact, every school in that school district has been hardened. And I think that's something that needs exploration. I was very, very impressed with that, and something that we need to take seriously is school safety and protecting our children. Not only public schools, but also private schools. We need to protect them all. They're all our kids. And the one thing that really, I think we really need to study is mental health. And the collaboration that everybody believes that universal background check checks all those boxes, I think they're mistaken. So and I'm not sure how to do it legally so it's constitutional, but we have to have discussions on how that is implemented, how it is resolved, so when a person does, because some folks with mental health issues, it's a lifelong endeavor. Some folks have periods and then get healthy, and how do they get removed from a list once they're on the list? There's all kinds of constitutional issues there that I'm not here to try and figure out, but it's a discussion that we all need to have. And so as we go forward, I think we need to make those decisions, and we need to have that discussion. And I think we're all here wanting the same thing. We want to protect each other. We just need to figure out what that looks like in a collaborative effort to get there. So I do believe, Senator Latz, that this discussion will be ongoing past these 2 days. And we look forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Howe. So now we're going to go into presentations of individual legislative proposals, some of which have had language drafted, some of which are not quite at that point yet, all of which could change in terms of language at whatever point legislative action might be taken. Senator Mohammed, you are first up with regard to your language to ban AR-type assault weapons. So if you would like to go to the testifier table, and we will invite the first two people on our testifier list. I'm sorry if I mispronounce any names. I'm guessing a little bit here. Malia Kimbrell and Megan Damon. If you would come forward and sit on the two end chairs there, Senator Mohammed will sit in the middle. Senator Mohammed, did you want to start with a brief description of your proposal, and then we'll hear from the testifiers?
Absolutely.
Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair Latz, and members of the Senate Working Group on Gun Violence and Prevention for the opportunity to speak with you today. I come before you in the wake of a summer marked by tragedy, by senseless gun violence and tragedy, not only here in Minnesota, but across our nation. Each tragedy underscored a painful truth. Weapons designed for war, built solely to take human life, have no place in our neighborhoods, schools, or public spaces. Because of our gun violence epidemic, children can no longer learn freely in their classrooms, families cannot worship safely in their houses of faith, and Minnesotans cannot walk our streets without fearing the unthinkable. Today, I'm presenting a bill to ban assault weapons and high-capacity magazines in Minnesota. This legislation addresses a narrow but deadly category of firearms that have repeatedly been used in mass shootings and amplifying devastation and death in seconds. By restricting access to these firearms, we can make meaningful progress in reducing gun violence and saving lives. I will briefly walk through the bill, Mr. Chair. Starting August 1st, 2026, this bill makes it illegal to make, import, sell, or own or possess the following guns: large capacity magazines, those that hold more than 10 rounds, .50 caliber or larger firearms, semi-automatic military-style assault weapons, also known as SEMSAWs, and undetectable firearms, those that can't be picked up by metal detectors. The bill also makes exceptions for certain groups to possess these guns if they're doing their job: police officers, members of law enforcement, members of the U.S. military, and licensed firearm manufacturers and dealers, only if they are selling them to law enforcement and military. Registering it, the bill also makes it required for folks to register these guns with the BCA starting January 1st, 2027. And if they are going to keep it, they have to notify their local law enforcement, renew their registration every 3 years, and store it securely. These guns can't be sold or transferred. And if folks don't want to keep them anymore and they currently legally own it, they have to turn it over to the BCA for it to be destroyed. The bill also, this also applies to folks who inherit these types of guns. There are some penalties associated with this piece of legislation: 5-year felony. It can carry up to a felony, up to 5 years in prison, $25,000, or both. And the BCA may charge a registration fee as well. Members, in the lead up to today's hearing, I've heard from constituents who told me how gun violence has affected their lives. A special education teacher who quit that job out of stress. A doctor who treats teenagers with anxiety because they are afraid of a classmate. A Minneapolis public schools teacher who talked about the disabling effect of shooting drills and said, and I quote, we cannot learn or teach after we have played this sick game of imagination. I've also heard from parents who live in fear. And today you will hear from parents whose fears have come true. They are demanding, like so many Minnesotans, that this legislation is not only necessary but urgent. And I want to acknowledge that their stories may be difficult to hear, but they are essential in grounding this debate in lived experience. I look forward to a respectful and constructive conversation, and I believe that if eventually passed, this legislation will save lives and move Minnesota one step closer to the Minnesota that our families and communities deserve. And Mr. Chair, we can get into testimony.
Thank you. Just so we have an idea of the time parameter here, we've allocated 15 minutes or so for this particular presentation. And the testifiers are going to be able to, for the group of parents, I should say. We have 5 parents identified who will be testifying. So, however you all decided to split that time up is up to you. Did I say Malia Kimbrell? Did I say it properly?
You did.
All right. Welcome to the Senate here.
Thank you.
Go ahead with your testimony.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Malia Kimbrell. I am a nurse, wife, Minneapolis resident, and mother of 2. My daughter Vivian is a 3rd grader at Annunciation Catholic School. She was injured in the recent mass shooting where 8-year-old Fletcher and 10-year-old Harper were killed when 116 bullets blew through the stained glass windows in 2 terrifying minutes. I continue to do daily dressing changes on several bullet wounds on Vivi's back and arm. Can you even imagine cleansing bullet wounds on your 9-year-old that they suffered while sitting in church? Her bullet wounds will eventually become scars, but the shrapnel embedded inside her will stay with her forever. And the same is true for the emotional trauma she suffered. Our entire community is suffering, but we haven't lost hope. I have a lot to say, but my time here is limited, so I'll cut to the chase. Undoubtedly, there will be another mass shooting, and more kids will die. If you think it won't hit your community and someone you love, think again. It is up to our lawmakers to decide what type of weapon the next mass shooter is armed with. You have that power, and with power comes responsibility. You have a responsibility to keep our kids as safe as possible. Any lawmaker who chooses not to support legislation banning semi-automatic, military-style assault weapons and large-capacity magazines is personally signaling to every child in the state of Minnesota that their safety doesn't matter enough. When the next mass shooting happens, who will be able to say that they at least tried to minimize the lives lost? This is one thing that can be done, one tangible step, one meaningful change, one attempt at keeping our kids safe. I am not naive enough to think that this will solve the problem entirely. There is more that we can do, and we should exhaust all of our options. But doing nothing is not an option. This legislation is what can be done soon, so make it happen. Taking action is our only hope. Our kids deserve to have their safety prioritized above all else. And if you stand in the way of that, shame on you. If you think it's acceptable that kids' lives are sacrificed while semi-automatic rifles can continue to exist here, shame on you. There is a risk and benefit to every decision. Saving kids' lives is the ultimate benefit that outweighs any possible risk. I would do anything to save my child's life. Wouldn't you do the same for yours? If there was a person shooting into a crowded room where your child was innocently sitting, how can you be comfortable with the shooter having easy access to legally buy an AR-15 capable of firing off more than 100 bullets a minute? What if the best option available was a Remington hunting rifle that fires less than 10 bullets a minute? Which option gives your child a greater likelihood of survival? Which option would save countless lives? You have the power to decide what the next mass shooter will or will not be armed with. You have the power to make a difference and have a positive impact on the safety of our kids. I beg you, take responsibility and don't let this opportunity pass you by. Our kids deserve a future filled with hope. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kimbrell. Ms. Damon, did I pronounce that correctly?
Yes, thank you. Chair Latz, my name is Megan Damon, and I am the mother of 2 Annunciation Catholic school students. They're here today. On August 27th, my children and others were under rapid gunfire for 2.5 minutes. 120 bullets shattered stained glass, ricocheted off pews, and tore into flesh. Fear, death, and destruction followed. All of this was preventable. Children describe how the bullets rained down. The ongoing grief, confusion, disruption, and trauma is our reality. All of this was preventable. Yesterday, I attended the memorial and celebration of life for Harper Moisky, 10. We committed to carry Harper's light forward. Last Sunday, I attended the funeral of Fletcher Merkel, 8. We committed to keeping Fletcher's exuberant energy going. All of this was preventable. I stand in full support of Senator Mohammed's proposal to ban assault weapons. My family is a hunting family. This is not about hunting weapons. This is about assault weapons, which have no place in civilian life. I am a nurse specializing in health promotion and disease prevention for both populations and systems. I see gun violence as a public health crisis. Every day in the U.S., more than 200 people are killed or injured by firearms. All of this is preventable. I urge you to support Senator Mohammed's proposal and to encourage your colleagues in the Senate to vote in its favor when the time comes. We can follow the lead of the 11 states that already banned assault weapons and high-capacity magazines. These states have demonstrated dramatic reduction in injuries and deaths after their bans. We can look to other nations for evidence, for example, Australia, where mass shootings have been eradicated since their ban of assault weapons. There's researchers, Lundberg and colleagues, has the seminal study that statistically analyzed mass shootings in the United States before and after our federal assault weapon ban. Unsurprisingly and unrefusably, there's a reduction in death and injury. The research is clear. Banning assault weapons prevents deaths. No single policy will solve all gun violence, but this step will save lives and protect our children. This ban would have prevented those 120 bullets from raining down on the people assembled at Annunciation Church. Together, we can prevent gun deaths in Minnesota and provide us all a future filled with hope. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Damon. If you would please now return to your seats, and we will invite Carla Maldonado and Brittany Haig forward. Ms. Maldonado, go ahead and.
Good morning.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, members of the working group, my name is Carla Maldonado, and I'm the mother of 2 children who survived the shooting at Annunciation Catholic School on August 27th. Thank you for convening this working group and giving me the chance to speak today. Almost 3 weeks ago, my children were at their weekly school mass, praying in a sacred space, when a gunman opened fire on them. 2 innocent children, Harper Moisky and Fletcher Merkel, were killed, just 10 and 8 years old. The morning of August 27th began like any other. I walked my kids the 2 blocks to school, kissed them goodbye, and walked home. Minutes later, my husband and I heard gunshots from our kitchen. My husband knew immediately what they were. I didn't want to believe it. Not here, not in our neighborhood. But then the second round of shots rang out. My husband said, "Those gunshots are at the school." I ran toward the school. My heart pounded in the pit of my stomach. My mind was flooded with images of my children shot and lying dead in their own pool of blood. I experienced a level of fear and horror I never knew existed. My husband was at the front of the church. He found our 7-year-old, but the relief was brief. He said, "I still don't have Pablo." That's our 11-year-old son. The moments that passed next felt like an eternity. Eventually, Pablo did leave the back of the church through broken glass doors. He was among the group that had sheltered in the basement. My children were among the lucky ones. We got to hug them after school that day. But they are not the same kids that I dropped off that morning. They have nightmares. They flinch at loud noises. They don't want to be alone. They scream for me with a panic in their voices that makes my heart hurt. They ask questions now, like, why does the shooter want to hurt us? As a trauma therapist, I'm well aware of the research of the impacts of trauma on the lives of the individuals who suffered. We are now living that. But you don't need data. You don't need research. What you need to do is to look into the eyes of my 7-year-old at night. And she looks at me and tells me she can't go to sleep because she's afraid there's a shooter in the house. This is our family's new reality. And this is a reality that so many of the families in our Annunciation community are suffering. The truth is, none of us will be the same after this. And I truly hope this can move us forward together, because that is what we need right now for our children. No matter who you are, what community you're from, how much money you make, who you voted for, who you prayed to, or if you pray at all, we want the same thing. We want our children to come home safe from school. I implore you, ban assault weapons and high-capacity magazines. There's one thing that kept more kids from dying on August 27th, and it wasn't a law or a policy. It was church pews. This is not safety for our children. This is not protection for our communities. This is survival by chance. And our children deserve better than this. Do not wait for another child to die. Do not wait for another mother to be sitting here again, telling you their story of fear, sorrow, and grief. Because the mothers, we will keep coming. We will keep speaking until our children are safe and until they can rest their heads safely at night, because they know they live in a country full of good people who care about their lives. And they will know this not by the words you speak, but by the actions you take to protect them. Thank you for this opportunity, and for listening, and for acting with the urgency this crisis demands. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Maldonado. Ms. Haig.
Good morning, co-chairs Latz and Mohammed, members of the working group. My name is Brittany Haig. I'm an educator and mother of 3. I'm here as a parent whose children survived a school shooting, and as a citizen who believes no child should ever live through the terror mine did. August 27th started like any other back-to-school day, chaotic, exciting, full of the thrill of something new. My youngest, David, only 6 years old, let me lace up his new black and red sneakers for the 3rd day of first grade and headed to school with his older brother and sister. Then our world shattered. David was shot at the first school mass of the year. His spleen was lacerated, shrapnel scattered through his left side. Bullets grazed the back of his head. He was rushed to Hennepin County Medical Center alongside the middle schoolers who protected him and his classmates. The quick response saved his life. But even as his wounds heal, he carries terror he has no words for. So do I. Annunciation is one in a long line of school shootings, a tragedy made more infuriating by the preventability of it. Other countries, Australia, Canada, Japan, New Zealand, the UK, faced mass shootings and changed laws. Here, our children continue to die because our laws treat guns as more important than human life. We cannot accept our children's lives as the price of inaction. No gun is more important than a child in a school. No gun is more important than a family at church. No gun is more important than any human life. I strongly support measures being proposed today, including prohibiting assault weapons and high-capacity magazines like the ones used in the Annunciation shooting, safe storage requirements, restrictions on ghost guns and binary triggers, repeal of state preemption of local firearms laws, public awareness campaigns for extreme risk protection orders, and the establishment of an Office of Gun Violence Prevention under the Department of Health. David wrote to leaders himself. He said it more simply. I got glass in my head. My buddy got hurt and I think he was bleeding on his head. My body has a scar from getting hurt. I went to the hospital. People shouldn't buy guns, and I think we should get rid of them. Guns are mean and harmful. Proposals that fail to address access to weapons are band-aids at best. Hardening schools is not the answer. Locking down schools further, putting SROs in more schools, arming teachers would not have prevented my son's injuries. Bulletproof glass covering our stained glass is a visible admission of defeat in the face of incomprehensible, preventable violence. These kids knew what to do. They did the drills. They followed the procedures. It didn't save them. Our children should not have to live and grow in fear to protect people who value guns more than human lives. Our children should not have to live in fear because adults don't have the moral courage to do what's right. I've been asked countless times in the last 3 weeks how David is doing. Physically, he's well, but that's only part of the truth. The truth is he's angry. He's scared, and he's confused. So am I. My son survived. That's not true for every family in my community, and I'm here because that survival is not without cost. It's time for a special session before another community feels the impact of this crisis. The time to choose life is now. The time to act is now. Our children cannot wait.
Thank you, Ms. Haig. If you two testifiers would please return to your seats. We have one more parent to testify. It's Brock Safe. And then if Becca Dryden could also come forward at this time. While they are approaching, I think I will be able to speak on behalf of all of the committee, that to the parents especially that are here and those who were on site or responded on site to Annunciation. Thank you for your courage, and our hearts go out to you and your families. We're very grateful that you came here today to share your stories and your strength, and we wish your families well. Mr. Safe.
My name is Brock Safe. I am the father of 2 Annunciation Catholic school students, Estella in 8th grade and Astoria in 5th grade. Both girls have attended Annunciation since preschool, and we have been in the Annunciation community for almost a decade. On the day of the shooting, both of my daughters were seated on the left side of the church. My 8th grader Estella was thankfully unhurt physically, but several of her friends to her left and right were shot directly, including one of her best friends who only last week was released from the hospital. It is a miracle my 5th grader Astoria is still with us today. She was located next to one of the windows where the pathetic coward carelessly shot dozens of military-grade AR-15 bullets through the stained glass windows of the church. Astoria was grazed by a bullet in the forehead and another on the right side of her neck. In addition to this, she has multiple bullet fragments lodged in her head, which will most likely be there for the rest of her life. Astoria was literally praying next to one of her best friends who was murdered in cold blood by this monster. This heartbreaking tragedy is something Astoria is still struggling to understand and will most likely for the rest of her life. My 10-year-old daughter, along with many others, are left to cope with horrific images that only seasoned combat veterans experience on the battlefield. And again, they were praying in a school church when this happened. What our children and teachers endured is unimaginable, a devastating consequence of a nation that continues to prioritize their love of guns over the safety and lives of our children. This is why I'm here. What happened on August 27th cannot be erased. It must stand for something. This must serve as a catalyst for meaningful change. It is our responsibility to break the cycle and ensure it does not continue to repeat as it has for so damn long. We cannot continue to live in a society where a deeply troubled individual can walk into a gun store and buy assault-style weapons, these machines that have no rightful place outside of a war zone. Yet this monster was able to legally acquire an AR-15, which he then used to unleash 116 rounds in just 120 seconds, tearing through a church filled with terrified children and staff. I personally do not own guns, but that does not mean I'm anti-gun. I completely understand the want for it for protection and for hunting. What I don't understand is why high-capacity semi-automatic rifles, bump stocks, and extended magazines continue to be legally and easily accessible. We urgently need stronger restrictions and sensible reform to our gun laws to ban these type of weapons. We need to make it as hard as humanly possible for these type of monsters to hurt our kids. Nothing will bring back Harper and Fletcher, our sweet children who were taken from us. And we cannot undo the heartbreak and tragedy that unfolded at Annunciation on that devastating day. However, we have a solemn responsibility and a moral obligation to fight for children across America to ensure that no other child faces the same fate. We cannot and we must not fail them. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Safe. And while Ms. Dryden is testifying, if Dr. Rachel Payne could come forward. Thank you. Ms. Dryden.
Co-chairs Latz and Mohammed and members of the working group, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Becca Dryden. I live in Minneapolis in Senator Mohammed's district, and I'm here in support of common sense gun safety legislation, including a ban on assault rifles and high-capacity magazines. This is not the first time my community has been devastated by a mass school shooting, and it's not the first time I've spoken out in hopes of preventing the next one. In March 2023, my family was living in Nashville, Tennessee, when a shooter, armed with an AR-style rifle, walked into a local private elementary school and murdered 3 children and 3 adults. Those children were 8 years old, the same age as my son at the time. In the days that followed, thousands of us rallied at the state capitol pleading with our elected officials to lead with courage. But they didn't. Instead, they chose to stand with gun lobbyists. Not one meaningful policy passed, neither during the special session nor the regular session that followed, despite months of persistent, vocal demands from grieving, terrified community members. My family, like many others in Tennessee, left Tennessee, including someone I just spoke to earlier. We no longer felt safe in a state that prioritized the interests of gun lobbyists over the lives of our children. Now, in 2025, I live just a mile and a half from Annunciation Church, where 2 children, the same ages as mine currently, were gunned down with an AR-style rifle as their classmates and community members prayed. It is a uniquely American experience to live through mass shootings in 2 different communities. But here in Minnesota, we have a chance to do something Tennessee did not. We can set an example for the rest of the country by showing that protecting our children matters more than appeasing the powerful gun lobbies. Tennessee became a testing ground for some of the most dangerous, radical ideas coming out of today's political climate. After the Covenant shooting, nothing meaningfully changed. Children were made to watch gun safety videos in kindergarten, while adults face no consequences for leaving unsecured firearms in their cars. The refusal to act wasn't just a failure of leadership, it was a national embarrassment. I came to Minnesota for a safer, more connected community, and I still believe we can be that. I urge this working group to guide the legislature toward meaningful, evidence-based gun safety laws that reflect the will of the people and offer a real hope to families still reeling from tragedy. Minnesota has an opportunity to lead, to model what it looks like when lawmakers prioritize public safety over political influence. We can offer the nation a glimpse of what's possible when elected officials lead with both heart and reason. We can be the spark that moves this country forward so that children like Harper and Fletcher won't have died in vain. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Dryden. And while Dr. Payne is testifying, would Dr. Rachel Weigert please come forward? Dr. Payne.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Thank you for this opportunity to speak in support of legislation to prevent gun violence. My name is Dr. Rachel Payne, and I am a trauma surgeon and the Associate Trauma Medical Director at Hennepin County Medical Center, Minnesota's largest and busiest trauma center, where I've spent the last decade caring for injured patients from all over the state. Among those injuries are hundreds of victims of gun violence. I've responded to many mass casualty incidents, most recently 2 of them within 24 hours of each other this month, both for mass shootings. On the morning of the Annunciation shooting, I had already been at work on trauma call for about 27 hours, during which I'd cared for mass shootings victims from South Minneapolis from the afternoon before. I'd spent the day and night operating on patients with life-threatening injuries in their chest and abdomen, providing critical care for others with life-altering facial and extremity injuries. Overnight, patients continued to be injured by guns, including one we were unable to save, despite heroic measures including opening his chest, trying to make his heart beat and stop the bleeding, while my emergency department colleagues poured blood into him. But he was already gone. Before I could even begin to process that 24 hours and the first mass shooting, another mass casualty alert sounded. I headed straight to the emergency department, where I was joined by fellow trauma surgeons, many of our resident doctors, emergency doctors, nurses, and everyone buzzing around to ready the trauma bays to receive what we were told as many as 20 injured children. The first wave arrived, 5 or 6 kids at once, some of them in stunned silence, some of them screaming, terrified that the shooter was still after them and could get them even in the hospital, others unconscious from their injuries, all of them bleeding and all of them permanently traumatized. My partners and I quickly determined who needed the operating room the most critically, and a couple of my partners began operating on some children that had been shot in the torso. All of their vital organs would have to be thoroughly surveyed. Bullets ricochet within the body. Some of the larger ammo can disperse into dozens of metal fragments on impact and scatter within the body cavity. They enter their target with such heat and force that they create blast injury in their wake far beyond the holes we can easily see from the bullet, which is why we have to carefully scrutinize every organ and blood vessel, and why the damage from gunshot wounds is so uniquely devastating and can sometimes not be repaired even when they get to us in time. While my partners worked, I went to the control desk at the operating room to help coordinate the remaining surgeons, operating rooms, and operating room staff to ensure that we could treat every child with the urgency and expertise they deserved. I evaluated every single child that came through our operating room that day as they came by the desk. I'm haunted by the looks in their eyes. The looks of horror, as if their sense of safety in childhood had just been snuffed out in seconds. Thank you. Then the influx of phone calls from the panicked parents came in, desperate to know if their child was going to live, if we had them there with us. Most of them we couldn't immediately give answers to, and they had to wait in anguish while multiple surgeons worked. I will never forget the agony in those parents' voices. What these victims, their loved ones, the community, and everyone who cares for them has experienced, no human being should have to suffer. In the wake of these major tragedies affecting our teams, we all have to go back to work the next morning, and we're all looking for ways to process this. And I've never had a satisfying answer for team members that have asked how to cope with the devastation we witness in events like this. But it does help to tell our stories to those of you who are empowered to prevent this from happening again. I urge you to pass meaningful legislation that limits access to the weapons designed for the most maximum permanent damage to human life. I implore you to pass legislation that saves lives and protects families from senseless violence. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Payne. And while Dr. Weigert is testifying, if Dr. Tim Kummer will come forward, please. Dr. Weigert.
Thank you. Chair Latz and committee members, my name is Dr. Rachel Weigert. I am a mother, a pediatric emergency medicine physician, and gun violence prevention researcher, and I am here today in full support of the bills before you. I was working in the emergency department at Children's Minnesota on the day of the Annunciation shooting. As a level 1 pediatric trauma center, our staff train regularly to be able to respond to these kinds of tragic events. We had just 5 minutes to prepare to care for 5 gunshot victims that were en route to our hospital. Our department, similar to Hennepin, immediately mobilized with over 50 additional staff, including a skilled team of pediatric specialized surgeons, neurosurgeons, anesthesiologists, emergency room physicians, nurses, child life specialists, and others to provide the complex care required for children with gunshot wounds. I am grateful to my colleagues at Hennepin Healthcare because they, of course, were preparing to do the same. Due to the smaller nature of children's bodies, a single bullet can do an incredible amount of damage. A bullet from an automatic rifle is designed to splinter into dozens of twisted metal shards, which can instantly kill a child due to critical organ and blood vessel damage. That is how Fletcher and Harper were murdered in their church that morning. The effect of gun violence compounds when taking into effect the emotional toll on everyone involved. Children require gentle and careful handling after a traumatic event, and especially when they are separated from their parents. My colleagues and I provide this nuanced care to children every day, and it was especially needed on August 27th. On the day of the Annunciation shooting, I cared for a child with bullet fragments in her arm and leg, and she told me she had likely sustained those injuries while protecting younger students by laying on top of them. I cared for another child who took a bullet to the back while shielding his friend. It ripped through his kidney. The common theme I heard from the kids that day was, "I know what to do because we train for this." While I'm in awe of these students' bravery, I am similarly devastated by the fact that we live in a society where we have asked this of our children and educators, to prepare with militaristic precision for the inevitability that they will be targeted and potentially murdered in their own school. In the emergency department, when we recommend different medical treatment than what a patient's family believes to be best, I have found it extremely useful to focus back on our common interest, the health and safety of their child. We should think about the contentious conversation around guns in the same way. Strong, entrenched feelings abound, and we need to refocus on our common goal: the life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness of our community members, each of whom you have the heavy and impactful burden of carrying. In addition to all of us here today, your packets include a letter signed by over 60 kid-focused organizations, including Children's Minnesota. This letter stresses the dire urgency of the moment we are in and pleads for your action. My children, your children, and any child that calls Minnesota home deserves to know that they can stay alive and safe from gun violence, whether at home, school, church, or anywhere in their community. Passing this bill is a critical step in making that happen. Thank you, Senator Mohammed, for your leadership.
Thank you, Dr. Weigert. Dr. Kummer.
Mr. Chair, good morning. Madam Chair, good morning. Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Dr. Tim Kummer. I'm an Assistant Medical Director of Hennepin EMS and an emergency physician at Hennepin Healthcare. I was the first physician on scene at the Annunciation school shooting. When I arrived, I joined our paramedics in assessing children who had been shot in the back, in the arms, in the head. As we took in the immense pain and fear in those children's eyes, we tried to comfort them as they were rushed to the hospital. Once all critical patients had been transported, our focus shifted to the children who said they were uninjured despite having blood on their clothes. We had to confirm that the blood on them was not from their own wounds, but from the classmates they had tried to shield. At the same time, we began the reunification process, matching parents to their children, which included the painful task of telling some parents their child had been shot and was at the hospital. Finally, we carried out the devastating task of telling parents their child had been killed while singing in church during the first week of school. I've seen many difficult things in my career, but what I witnessed that morning was unlike anything else. I saw the horror in the eyes of innocent children, the fear of parents desperate to know if their child was alive, and I heard the screams of mothers and fathers when they were told their child had been murdered. I still see those faces when I close my eyes, and I hear their voices when I try to go to sleep. But gun violence is nothing new to our communities. The Black and brown communities we serve have lived with this painful reality for decades. It angers me that it took a church full of children for us to gather here today. And yet, even now, you debate if you should act. I don't know if or what I could have done differently that day, but I do know this. The level of chaos and the depth of suffering was because of the type of weapon used. At Annunciation, the shooter fired more than 100 rounds with a high-powered rifle. That is why there were so many victims. That is why the injuries were so severe. The type of gun matters. At Annunciation, I cared for a 12-year-old girl who had what looked like a very small graze wound to the top of her head, an abrasion, nothing else. But despite that bullet never entering her brain, the energy from the rifle was so powerful it caused severe bleeding in her brain, and she had to have part of her skull removed. From a handgun, that wound would likely have only been a graze wound, but from a high-powered rifle, it became a life-threatening brain injury. Assault rifles turn survivable injuries into fatal ones. They turn small tragedies into mass tragedies. I know some will say that most gun violence involves handguns, not high-powered rifles, and that might be true. But in an event like Annunciation, the rifle made everything worse. It turned potentially minor wounds into life-threatening ones. It multiplied the number of children shot, and it amplified the trauma for families, for first responders, and for healthcare providers. I am not a gun expert, but I am an expert in the aftermath. The suffering these weapons inflict and the PTSD they leave with my colleagues and me. I see firsthand how the type of gun determines the destruction. Not banning these weapons compounds our suffering. For victims, for families, for first responders, and for healthcare providers, your inaction is not neutral. Your inaction is acceptance. You have the power to save lives and to decrease suffering. Please take meaningful action and swift action to limit access to weapons designed for maximum and permanent damage to life. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kummer. And thank you to all the medical responders for your ongoing work in that field. We're now going to invite Archbishop Bernard Hebda from the Minnesota Catholic Conference, Archdiocese of St. Paul and Minneapolis, to come forward, and along with him, Ethan Roberts, the Jewish Community Relations Council, to come forward as well. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Latz and members of the working group. I am Bernard Hebda, the Roman Catholic Archbishop of St. Paul in Minneapolis, here today on behalf of my brother bishops of the Minnesota Catholic Conference. We are at a pivotal moment for our state and our nation, wounded by heart-rending acts of violence against both children and those in public life. Amidst the tragedy that occurred on August 27th at Annunciation Church and School, I've been encouraged by the way so many in our local community, not just Catholics, have come together to grieve and to heal and to resolve to work for change. I'm very thankful to all who are encouraging these important discussions about how to protect human life from the plague of gun violence, and to all who are working intentionally to find common ground for the common good. As noted by the many parents and parishioners who have written to me in the last 3 weeks, the simplest starting point in addressing gun violence is the guns themselves. Referring to the tragedy at Annunciation, Pope Leo has urged us to plead to God to stop the pandemic of arms, large and small, which infects our world. We must do our part. Although guns have legitimate uses and gun ownership is a protected right in our nation, certain guns and ammunition carry with them the ability to create mass casualties in a very short time. These hearings are a great opportunity for the public to bring forward creative solutions that promote gun safety, including those proposed today. Both the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops and the Minnesota Catholic Conference have supported common sense gun laws, as well as limitations on possession of assault rifles and high-capacity magazines. The solution to the challenge in front of us, however, goes deeper than guns. I urge you, when considering needed policy solutions, to be mindful of the deeper causes of gun violence and of the many ways in which current legislation more broadly communicates a lack of appreciation for the value of each human life. Innocent children were targeted at Annunciation, as in far too many other incidents. We need consistent and dedicated funding that protects all students as a matter of public safety. It's not a matter of which school kids attend, whether public or private. Rather, it's a matter of partnering together and making a commitment to support every child in our community, as we do with access to school lunches and law enforcement. Finally, let me note that we must deal with the despair and hatred that fuel these shootings. While the faith community must address the deep spiritual aspect of that crisis, sound public policy is also needed to adequately address mental health needs in our community. I hope that our legislature won't shy away from examining the impact of mental health problems or increasing the likelihood of people posing a damage to themselves or to others. The broad legalization of dangerous THC products and the ban on counseling for those struggling with gender dysphoria might be two areas meriting reconsideration. In short, the Minnesota Catholic Conference supports a comprehensive approach to protecting innocent lives from the plague of gun violence, and we hope legislators are willing to show courage and prudence in working for the common good. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you for being here, Archbishop. Appreciate your testimony. Mr. Roberts.
Thank you, Chairman Latz. Thank you, Senators. Thank you, staff. My name is Ethan Roberts. I am the Deputy Executive Director for the Jewish Community Relations Council of Minnesota and the Dakotas. Jewish tradition teaches whoever destroys a single life destroys an entire world. We know that's true. We know that's true from those who've testified earlier today. We know that's true beyond what happened at Annunciation. At this time of tragedy, we stand with the Annunciation family. We stand with the people here. And with our Catholic brothers and sisters, the Catholic community has stood with our Jewish community in our darkest hours, and today we're here with you. We agree with Archbishop Hebda. This crisis does require a comprehensive response. When it comes to school safety, they're all our kids, they're all our babies. Doesn't matter if they're at public or private schools. And yes, measures to reduce gun violence, including suicides and accidents, must be part of a solution. I've been doing this a long time. I know that our resources are limited. I know the legislature is divided. But Jewish tradition also reminds us that it is not your duty to finish the work, but neither are you free to neglect it. So please, do the most good that you can. As the Archbishop said, find the common good find the common ground for the common good. Entire worlds are depending on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. We'll now invite to the table Rob Dorr from the Minnesota Gun Owners Caucus. Mr. Dorr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the working group. My comments are more broadly directed at the packages of things before us. I will comment on some of the items of this bill, as I imagine this will be my only opportunity to speak. I am too heartbroken by what's happened recently in Minnesota, and I too hope that this can drive some action. I'm going to refrain from going through line by line some of these bills, the issues that I see with them, and hopefully we can all agree on things that are going to get broad support, that aren't going to be useful for political footballs in the election year, and that can actually make a difference. The assault weapons ban from 1994 to 2004 has been invoked, that it saw a reduction in shootings, which is true. That is a correlation, but it's not a causation. The DOJ did a study evaluating the effectiveness and could find no linking to that. And part of that's because non-firearm crimes also decreased at the same rate as did property crimes. Interestingly, after the ban was lifted in 2004, for 10 years, the rate still went down, even though the sales of the previously banned firearms increased dramatically. Relying on an assault weapons ban, I don't think is going to get us there. In the COVID era is when things really started to spike again. In 1989, California passed an assault weapons ban and has seen more mass public shootings than any other state, according to Mother Jones research. What I'm hoping that we can get across is things that will actually make a difference. Even if all of these bills became law that are being proposed today, there's no indication that that would have prevented this shooting. This person was not a prohibited person. They had no inability that wouldn't make them be able to comply with every aspect of these laws. There's no background check that can detect somebody's internal crisis. But there are things that can be done to help identify those with an impending crisis and connect them to resources. Our sheriffs were here just this past June or July, and they were discussing in a press conference about the complete lack of ability to find beds for those undergoing civil commitment. In Minnesota, there's a rule that within 48 hours of somebody being civilly committed who's incarcerated, they have to be transferred to a civil commitment bed. There are people in jail that have been there for weeks, months, and sometimes even over a year, sitting in jail because there's no bed available to them. There are lots of opportunities for us to look at community-based resources. We have prepared in the packet, and I would encourage members to look at that, several ideas of ways that we can help identify somebody who's in an impending crisis and intervene early. 80% of people who engage in mass shooting attacks are in an identifiable mental crisis, and over half of them leak information about their plans before they do that. That is going to intercept those people before they engage in whatever heinous act that they want. The deadliest school attack on a school in our history didn't involve a firearm at all. It involved a bomb. The deadliest school shooting in our country's history involved 2 handguns. I am less interested in bickering over what specific design feature of a firearm makes it more dangerous or less dangerous, and more interested in trying to find solutions that can identify somebody who's in crisis, connect them to resources, divert them from violence long before they start whatever journey of harm that they are seeking to inflict. I think that's going to get 201 votes in this legislature and can actually make a big difference in protecting families in our public places. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dorr. And by the way, time allowing, there are a number of other proposals coming before us, and if you would like to let us know if you have a comment to make on any of the other proposals as we get to them in the testimony here this morning, just let us know and we'll try to fit that back in.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Sure. And members, in your packet, there is a document from the Gun Owners Caucus, which goes into more detail on Mr. Dorr's comments. Appreciate the suggested solutions in addition to your disagreement with some of the proposals. So that's it for public testimony on this proposal. While we have Senator Mohammed present at the testifier table, do any members of the working group have any questions or comments they'd like to make specifically to this? Senator Westland.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator Mohammed. I am so deeply sorry that we are here today. And I am so deeply sorry that this is a problem that has persisted for decades. You should not be here. You should not have to repeat and share your trauma over and over again in order to get the attention of legislators. We have been at this moral inflection point over and over and over again in this country. And there has been an absolute refusal to act. I agree we need to take a holistic approach to gun violence prevention and the prevention of gun deaths. Many of you have probably heard my story about my best friend's death by suicide in 1991 with a gun he should have never had access to. In Judaism, there is a practice called musar, and we talk about a behira point. It is a choice point. It is a point where we have an opportunity to make a choice, to go this way or that way, to act with love and kindness and compassion, or to act with hate. We have been at this behira point over and over and over again, and we have a choice. This is not a political football. This is not a political issue. This is a health crisis. This is an epidemic in our nation, in our society. And the question is, will we meet this moment this time? Will we meet this moment this time? I was at the memorial and celebration yesterday, and Pastor Hurley told a story about the Giants, and he asked us all, are you all in? Are you all in? In this moment, are you all in to do something? We are being begged to act. Are you all in? And I want you to know I am all in. And I have been all in this fight for a very, very long time. We need to be done with this. There needs to be bold action, and every person in this legislature should cast their vote. And if you think voting against a ban on assault-style weapons is the right thing to do, then stand by your vote. But let's have the vote. I am angry. I am outraged. This has been a summer of devastation. Devastation that visited us, that visited our colleagues. We're at a Bahira point. I beg of everyone to take the action that we can take, that we must take, to have courage, to have moral clarity. This should not be a hard vote, and this should have 201 votes. And my broken heart is not optimistic about that. And I call on all of you to keep coming here and begging of us to take action. And I will stand with you every moment. I am all in.
Senator Lucero. And I should note that we have a couple of people came forward to the testifier table. I believe they're with the Brady campaign, available to answer questions. Senator Lucero.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just want to thank the parents, everybody who's come out, but specifically the parents who've shared their voices, for the courage to come forward and share your testimonies. Our hearts, not only those of us on this work group, but those across the state and the country, share your pain. And again, it's incredible that you've come forward to muster the courage through your experience and tragedy to be able to share, again, your voices. Evil is real. Evil is committed to violence. Evil targets our children and innocent men and women across the state and across the country. I look at some of the news articles of the Westman describing an obsession with mass shootings specifically in schools, and Westman appeared to reference memories of obsession dating back to 7th grade, while also revealing conversations about mass shootings with friends at a young age. Another article says the shooter was obsessed with the idea of killing children. The shooter saw the attack as a way to target the most vulnerable among us while they were at their most vulnerable, at school and at church. Evil must be confronted. Evil must be stopped. We must return to valuing life. No child should have to endure the violence that they did here or anywhere. No parent should have to endure fear and live with fear for their child's safety. Again, we must return to a culture that values life. We must ensure safe schools, safe communities, and expanded access to mental health services. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Lucero. All right, that is going to conclude this portion of the testimony with regard to Senator Mohammed's proposal. We thank everyone for coming to the hearing. We're going to adjust the agenda a little bit here to accommodate testifiers' schedules. We're going to take up Senator Pappas's proposal dealing with local preemption next, and Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Fry is present to testify. Mayor Fry, if you'd come forward, and I believe Senator Pappas is on her way down to the hearing room as well. Mayor, come on forward. And I also understand Brooke Blakey is anticipated to testify. If Ms. Blakey is in the room, you can also come forward. Mayor Fry, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, co-chairs, member of the work group, thank you so much for having me here today. My name is Jacob Fry. I am the mayor of Minneapolis, and I find it striking and frustrating that we are here yet again. I wanted to give a brief rundown of what we saw on that day, but also, more importantly, what we can do to prevent that kind of thing from ever happening in the future. I was on site shortly after the tragic shootings took place. And what occurred was officers arriving in about 4 minutes flat. They didn't hesitate, they busted through the doors. They were looking for another potential shooter. At the same time, they were looking to put out potential explosives. They were tying kids in tourniquets at the same time they were instructing other children how to fill a gaping wound full of gauze. The gravity of the harm and the injuries to these children were clearly the result of being able to reel off a ton of bullets in a very short period of time. But for the incredible and heroic efforts of these students, of the teachers and faculty, of our law enforcement professionals and first responders, and of the medical professionals, it would not have just been 2 tragic deaths. It could have been 8 or 10. These deaths are preventable, and the solutions are known because they're the same solutions we've had 3 years ago, 5 years ago, and 25 years ago. Other countries have experienced these kinds of tragic shootings, and they've decided that they're going to do something about it. The only difference is that we haven't. And because we haven't, it happened this month, and it could happen 3 months from now. One of the most striking things is the number of mayors that have reached out to me from other cities that have themselves experienced a tragic school or church shooting. And the solutions are known. And by the way, nobody is talking about banning your father's hunting rifle. This is not about ducks and deer. This is about having the ability to reel off 30 bullets or even more before reloading. This is about magazine clips. This is about guns that were built to harm large numbers of people in a very short period of time, to pierce body armor and to pierce flesh. We don't need to have these kinds of guns on the street, and I feel a very deep responsibility as mayor of the city of Minneapolis to do something about it, because I'm the one that gets the calls at 2 in the morning that yet another kid has been gunned down, whether it's in the street or at a school. The loss of lives of our children should propel us forward to act. And sitting here today, we certainly have the ability to do so. We have the ability to make the difference so that this never happens again. This is not an ideological fight. It's not a partisan one. This is not about love of guns. This is about love of our children, which is a common thread throughout all humanity, regardless of race, religion, creed, or even political party. We all love our kids. I love my kids. And we want to do everything that we possibly can to protect them in this moment. And so, yes, we are standing very much in support of a ban on assault weapons. We are standing in support of a ban on high-capacity magazines. We are standing in support of the ability for cities and municipalities, and thank you, Senator, to prevent these kinds of guns to go into governmental buildings. And although it is not on the agenda, we would also like the ability to do this ourselves as municipalities if others don't have the will or the ability to do it themselves. We have this responsibility, and it is on every single one of us to step up so that something like this never happens again. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Mayor Fry. Senator Pappas, the bill that we're considering for testimony information right now is Senate File 2320, your bill regarding local preemption. If you'd like to just tell us what the bill proposal does.
Thanks.
And dovetails on what Mayor Fry was here for. And then also we'll hear from your testifier, Ms. Blakey, as well. Senator Pappas.
Thank you, Senator Latz and Chair Mohammed and working group members. Thank you for hearing Senate File 2320 this morning. I can't begin to match the emotional testimony. In fact, I don't even want to try that we've been hearing and I've been watching on the TV upstairs. The irony of this bill, which allows local government to prohibit or restrict a person from possessing a dangerous weapon, ammunition, or explosives within a building or land owned or leased by the local government unit, such as a recreational center or a library, a city hall, or city parks. What's ironic about this is one of the local news people discovered that during my first term in the legislature, which must have been 1985, that's when this law, this preemption law, was passed, and I voted against it. And here we are now, 40 years later, still having this law that doesn't allow local governments. You can prohibit bringing a gun into a local business or into the courthouse, but if you're a local city hall that's not joined with a courthouse, or you can prohibit bringing a gun into a school, but not into a rec center or not on the playground. I mean, that inconsistency just doesn't make sense to me. We should have local governments should be able to have the authority to ban guns. We've had incidences, I'm sure many cities have had incidences, but we really need to let local governments have this local control and the ability to ban firearms in government-owned and leased buildings like our libraries and rec centers. I think that's one of the many tools we need in preventing gun violence. It's certainly not the only tool. You have a lot of bills on your agenda that it's a combination of things that needs to happen. So I have here to testify with me, Brooke Blakey, who's from the city of St. Paul. The mayor was unable to make it. He sends his apologies. But she's the director of neighborhood safety, and she's going to give some additional remarks about the importance of giving this authority to local governments.
Ms. Blakey, welcome to the working group.
Thank you, Senator Pappas. Co-Chair Latz, Co-Chair Mohammed, and the members of the Senate Gun Violence Prevention Working Group, thank you for your leadership and commitment to addressing this current and urgent crisis. Ending gun violence requires all of us at every level of government to work together. Senator Pappas, thanks you again for that invitation to attend this morning. Again, my name is Brooke Blakey, and I serve as the Director for the Office of Neighborhood Safety in the City of St. Paul. I am here today on behalf of our capital city to address the strong support of Senate File 2320, a bill that gives local government the authority to prohibit or restrict dangerous weapons, ammunition, or explosives in local government-owned or leased spaces. As the Director of the Office of Neighborhood Safety, I have experienced myself gun violence. My dear friend son Dre was shot at this Annunciation shooting. Gun violence is community violence. A single shooting ripples far beyond where it happens. It reaches our schools, our libraries, and our rec centers, places that are built for our children and families. When those places lose a sense of safety, our entire community suffers. Through our work, we know gun violence is first modeled, then replicated, creating cycles where guns become dangerous regardless of age, education, and socioeconomic background. That's why our Community First Public Safety Strategy is laser focused on intervening in those cycles where providing wraparound services for youth and communities have been impactful and have been impacted by the gun and group violence that we have. Our work is grounded in a collaboration first with one another, then with schools, our libraries, rec centers, and our community organizations like Moms Demand Action. As we are addressing trauma, building trust, and interrupting cycles of violence every single day, we end it before it even begins. This framework grew out of a robust community engagement of our stakeholders, all of which echoed a very clear message. Our police officers, firefighters, and first responders cannot ensure the safety of our neighborhood alone. We need to do it together. After the city created our Office of Neighborhood Safety, launched Project Peace, deployed our non-fatal shooting unit, and the collective partnership with our community leaders, optimal response teams, social service providers, and law enforcement, we breathed new life into a sustainable approach of addressing gun and group violence. These combined efforts prove that we long know before what is true, and we now have the evidence to support our empirical knowledge that intervention and prevention works. Gun violence is preventable. We are seeing real, tangible results. We saw those results because our community took action. Local municipalities don't just respond to these challenges, we live them. We see them, and we carry the responsibility for solving them. But for far too long, Minnesota's preemption law have tied our hands. It has blocked cities like St. Paul from enacting the critical gun violence prevention strategies our residents have demanded and they deserve. Senate File 2320 changes that. It gives us the authority to keep firearms out of our spaces where our children, our families, and our communities gather. We believe that this bill does more than just grant us authority. It symbolizes the belief that in the direct communities leading the very work to reduce and eliminate gun violence, St. Paul is ready to do that. We've prioritized violence prevention programs. We've passed a safe storage ordinance. Our non-fatal and our ONS unit is clearing shots fired cases at a higher rate than the national average. We have partnerships, we have the infrastructure, and the will to act immediately once preemption is lifted. Our communities deserve safety, and our communities deserve to feel protected. I urge you to support Senate File 2320, and the City of St. Paul looks forward to working alongside you. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, Ms. Blakey. Senator Pappas will take up your other proposal at this time as well.
Chair.
File. Senator Drahan.
Thank you, Chair. If I could ask the author a question.
Of course, go ahead.
Thank you. And I know these are just for conversation. I appreciate the bill copy of Senator Pappas, but just, I don't sit on Senator Latz's committee, so I'm not in the know as much, but do we have a definition of dangerous weapon in statute already?
Mr. Chairman, I think we'd have to ask our Senate
Senator
counsel
Pappas.
that question.
Well, Senator Pappas, since this is not an official
Right.
Senate committee hearing, I don't know that our Senate counsel is present to answer that question.
And then if I could, Chair and Senator Pappas, on 1.13, provided under subdivision 1G, I didn't follow the reference there either. And I know this is just preliminary and we can take it on at a later point. But I just thought I'd ask. Thank you.
Senator Draheim, Senator Mohammed looked it up, and Chapter 609.02, our criminal code statute in the definition section, subdivision 6 defines dangerous weapon.
And Mr. Chairman, I'd have to look that up as well, but subdivision 1G, I mean, there are places in which guns can be prohibited, like in schools, in courthouses. So my assumption is that is allowed. So our city hall is combined with our courthouse, so we're able to prohibit guns, but in Minneapolis, the city hall is separate from the courthouse, so city hall is not allowed to prohibit guns. A local business can prohibit guns, but a library can't.
I served on a city council for 9 years, and we were separate from the police department across the street.
Right.
But we didn't have the authority to ban firearms, and sometimes local issues can get pretty testy. All right, any other questions for Ms. Blakey on this bill, or Senator Pappas on this bill? All right, thank you, Ms. Blakey. Senator Pappas on Senate File 1580, the Violence Prevention Project Research Center funding. I understand Dr. Jim Densley is present as well. If you come forward, Dr. Densley. This is a bill that was introduced and considered in the last legislative session, has over the years received funding. So Senator Pappas, if you'd like to describe it, or turn it over to Dr. Densley when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. This is actually a funding bill to continue the funding that we did do in 23 and 24 for the Violence Prevention Center, which is located at Hamline University. And I think that the approach that they have taken, I think, has been very useful. They're a nonpartisan resource for policymakers, schools, communities, and governments. They look at, they publicize their research. Dr. Densley's a sociologist. His partner is a psychologist and former criminal investigator, Jillian. It's really put Minnesota on the map as a leader. And they look to see whether our policies that we have passed, like ERPO and safe storage, is really effective. I think we really need this kind of research institute. And I'm going to let Dr. Densley talk a little bit more about the work they've been doing, and then hope that, you know, whether this committee has the ability, I'll talk to Senator Marty, but I think it would be really important to keep funding them.
Dr. Densley, welcome.
Thank you. Co-Chair Latz, Co-Chair Mohammed, thank you, members of the committee, for the opportunity to speak here today. My name is James Densley. I'm Professor of Criminology and Criminal Justice and the co-founder of the Violence Prevention Project Research Center based at Hamline University. First, let me acknowledge the tragedies that bring us together today. In June, the horrific murders of Speaker Melissa Hortman and her husband Mark, the attack on Senator John Hoffman and his wife Yvette, they shook our state to its core. And then just a week later, the mass shooting, Annunciation Church in Minneapolis, reminded us again of the urgent need to address gun violence in our schools, places of worship, and communities. At the Violence Prevention Project Research Center, we've been studying these issues for years. Our databases track every public mass shooting in the United States since 1966. Every homicide in schools, churches, college campuses, and workplaces, and every attack on our elected officials. Our research is published in leading scientific journals, and it's available to the public, to practitioners, and to policymakers. We have examined school shooting threats, the role of social media in mass shootings, firearm storage practices, and the mental health impacts of exposure to violence. We also translate that science to the public, from local Star Tribune op-eds to national television appearances and contributions to outlets like the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal. We host conferences, trainings, and community forums that bring together law enforcement officials, educators, healthcare professionals, and policymakers. Our goal is not just to study violence, but to equip Minnesotans with the knowledge and tools to prevent it. Now, recently we collaborated with colleagues at Johns Hopkins University to release the state's first evidence-based implementation guide for Minnesota's new Extreme Risk Protection Order law, a report on what's working, what challenges remain, and how to strengthen prevention. Overall, what our work shows is that there are no easy answers, but there are evidence-based strategies that can save lives. And that's what brings us here today. On one point, we all agree. None of us wants to live in a society where children are shot in schools, where parishioners are gunned down in churches, or where our public figures are assassinated for their political beliefs. We all share that goal. Where the disagreement arises is not about the end result, but about how best to get there. That's not a political question. That's a scientific one. And it can only be answered through rigorous, independent, nonpartisan research. Minnesota has the opportunity to lead by investing in evidence, not ideology. So by funding the Violence Prevention Project Research Center, you are funding the science that allows us to test ideas, to evaluate programs, and to guide policy with data rather than rhetoric. Because here's the reality. When the legislature originally funded the center, it allowed us to get off the ground. But when that funding was pulled in the last session due to budget constraints and compromises, we actually lost all ability to sustain a dedicated staff. Today, the center has no full-time employees, zero. As the co-founders, Gillian Peterson and I, run the center on top of full-time professor jobs. The demand for our expertise, for data, for briefings, for training, far exceeds what we can possibly meet under those conditions. And this is not unique to Minnesota, by the way. Federal funding for research in this space has been cut back and it remains uncertain. It leaves states to fill the gap. Some, like New Jersey, have stepped up by funding a state gun violence research center. And Minnesota can and should do the same. This is how we move forward, together, shared in a united commitment to prevent violence and protect the people of Minnesota. Now, I know some people are going to ask, why does research cost money? What does $1 million a year really pay for? Well, it pays for professional staff, PhD-level researchers who collect, code, and analyze data at scale. It pays for maintaining public databases, hosting trainings and conferences, producing timely reports that practitioners and policymakers can actually use. True story. It once paid for us to conduct research at the request of the Commissioner of Public Safety and the Superintendent of the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. It pays for independence so that our findings are not driven by politics or advocacy, but by science. The cost of not funding this research is even greater. Every mass shooting, every preventable tragedy costs Minnesota lives, communities, and millions of dollars in emergency response, medical care, lost productivity, and as we have heard, just heartbreaking today, long-term trauma. For a fraction of that, we can invest in the science of prevention. So by funding us, you're not just supporting research, you're ensuring that Minnesota has the capacity, the staff, the infrastructure, the independence to generate solutions, test what works, and share those findings widely. Thank you for your time here today.
Thank you, Doctor. Any questions for this testifier while he's there? Senator Westland.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. I have had just the privilege to frequently speak with Dr. Peterson and Dr. Densley, and Senator Pappas. I have been in conversations with them about this very funding issue, and I would actually like to offer maybe a tweak to your bill. First of all, I'd like to give them a little bit more than $1 million, but the other piece is I would like us to have a separate funding stream specifically to study the radicalization and manipulation of youth. This is an enormous problem to talk about sort of the issues around social media. So I would love to work with you on that, and maybe we can bump up that dollar amount a little bit more and provide some dedicated funding for that very specific issue.
Thank you, Senator Westland. All right, and Dr. Densley, Senator Pappas, thank you for the presentations.
Thank you.
Members, what we're going to do now, we have Attorney General Keith Ellison here to testify in connection with this whole issue, including my ghost gun bill. Then we're going to take a 5-minute recess after that's concluded, and then we'll return to the rest of the agenda after that is done. So I'm going to hand the gavel over to co-chair Senator Mohammed.
So Chair Latz, you'll go over your proposal, and then we'll have Attorney General go after you.
Thank you, Senator Mohammed and members. A ghost gun is a gun that exists without a serial number or any identifying mechanism to keep track of it and to trace where it might have come from. Federal law does require serial numbers, and Minnesota law piggybacked on federal law to ban ghost guns. The problem is that there are guns now that are manufactured, either assembled from kits that come in the mail, or they're actually manufactured on 3D printers, and they don't have serial numbers. There was a recent Supreme Court decision that interpreted Minnesota statute in connection with the federal law and concluded that Minnesota statute was ineffective in adopting or incorporating the federal ban. So the proposal that will come forward on this will be to fix the Minnesota statute to reinstate a ban on ghost guns. It's important to be able to trace the provenance of firearms that are used in crimes, among other things, and to get rid of the anonymity that is accomplished by having a gun without a serial number. So that's the purpose of that specific bill. I have with me the Attorney General of Minnesota, Keith Ellison, to testify on this, and of course anything else in connection with this general topic you'd like to share.
Thank you, Chair Latz. Attorney General Keith Ellison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And let me say thank you as well, Senator Latz, for your leadership and this entire committee. I am so honored to be able to present to you today, and I'm grateful to the Senate for convening this work group and airing solutions for reducing and ending gun violence in Minnesota. So-called ghost guns are untraceable firearms without serial numbers. They can be assembled in as little as 20 minutes through kits and of component parts that anyone can order online. They can also be 3D printed. This means that people who are not legally entitled to possess guns, including people with felony convictions, minors, people with a record of domestic violence, can get a ghost gun and easily circumvent the law. Ghost guns have rapidly proliferated in Minnesota and beyond. In 2019, Minneapolis Police Department recovered just 3 ghost guns. By 2022, ghost guns had been used in at least 120 crimes in the metro area, including a shooting at the Mall of America and the shooting at Richfield High School that left a young person dead. The killer of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson used a 3D printed ghost gun to assassinate him. Several years ago, I was part of a coalition of attorneys general that supported a rule that the Federal Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives proposed to require that ghost guns have serial numbers and that vendors must conduct background checks before selling them, which the Biden administration adopted in 2022. When that rule was immediately challenged, the coalition of AGs leapt to defend it, including Minnesota, at every stage of the litigation. I was very pleased when earlier this year, a 7-2 majority of this United States Supreme Court ruled that the ATF rule can stand. However, in a ruling earlier this year, as Senator Latz noted, the Minnesota Supreme Court ruled that the current Minnesota law does not clearly require all firearms to have serial numbers. While I wish the court had found differently, we accept the ruling of the court, and I think that this must be fixed legislatively. Senator Latz, I support the legislation you have drafted to require new ghost guns to be serialized and subject to background checks, and that owners of existing ghost guns must apply to the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension for the issuance of a serial number. This is a common sense measure that will bring Minnesota in line with 15 other states that have enacted a similar law. It will also provide a backdrop if the Trump administration vacates the Biden rule. But I think there's some things we can do to go even a little further. For example, we could prohibit 3D printing of firearms and the distribution of 3D printing firearms files, and we could directly prohibit the sale or marketing of unserialized firearms parts by gun makers and retailers. This bill could go even further by providing the Attorney General's office with civil enforcement authority under Minnesota Statute 8.31 and provide a private right of action for victims against ghost gun makers. The legislature could do more to help my office hold accountable those whose actions put guns in the wrong hands. All of us have agreed that some people should not have guns and are not responsible enough to possess them. A state statute granting the Attorney General's office increased authority to initiate civil action against all parties involved in illegal firearm trafficking would build on my office's authority to seek civil penalties and injunctive relief against traffickers, straw purchasers, sellers, or negligent gun dealers, all of which is illegal but needs a little more teeth. The new tool would represent a significant step toward reducing the flow of illegal firearms to our communities, disrupt the illicit supply of guns, and hold accountable those who knowingly or negligently enable gun violence. Let me just wrap up by saying, nearly 2 decades ago, the United States Supreme Court established in the Heller decision that Americans have an individual right to own firearms. That's the law. I happen to be one of those people. Yes, I do own firearms. But I know what most firearm owners know. Millions of American gun owners like myself support common sense gun laws because we know that guns are the leading cause of death by young people in America, and they're the #1 cause of death to our law enforcement officers. Our state has strong common sense gun laws. We can make them even better without violating anyone's rights or taking rights away from people. There's no reason we should allow untraceable ghost guns to dodge those laws and proliferate in Minnesota. So thank you.
Thank you, Attorney General. Members, any questions for Senator Latz or the Attorney General? All right.
Thank you all.
Thank you. We will take a 5-minute break, and I just want to let the audience know, please keep your tickets for re-entry into the room. Okay, everyone, if you guys want to take your seats, we'll have Senator Latz present his Civil Commitment Coordinator bill. And we have no testimony, so if members have questions for him, get those ready.
Madam Chair.
Senator Latz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The first bill I want to mention here is my bill, which we did have drafted and introduced in the last a couple of legislative sessions, a civil commitment bill. This is a bill that would add a position to the Minnesota Attorney General's office. It would be a civil commitment coordinator position along with one support staff person whose role would be to assess the landscape of civil commitment in Minnesota, to particularly look at the intersection between mental health issues and the criminal justice system, to manage an ongoing panel of expert advisors to improve our civil commitment and mental health system in Minnesota. My own view is that obviously we have had lots of discussions about gaps within our mental health system in Minnesota, and these gaps have been ongoing and include funding issues, but include other issues as well. And I think we need to have a dedicated staff person outside of the existing structure and within the Attorney General's office to help us coordinate and present legislative proposals to address those gaps. There have been some very successful changes in Florida, and that can be looked at as well, in particular within the criminal justice and the judiciary system there. But I don't have to go into a lot of detail because we've all heard from various sources issues with regard to mental health. We know that there is an intersection between mental health issues and our civil justice system, and in a very small percentage, but obviously difficult times when those mental health issues release themselves into violence, and we need a system that can do a better job of treating mental illness when it comes into the system and identifying those who might be prone to violence and addressing those concerns as well. So that is the proposal for that. The other bill that I wanted to propose, as many of you know, I was the chief author of the red flag bill, and also known as the ERPO bill, and it has been used a lot. It's a bill that sets up a judicial process for going into court and getting a court order either on an emergency expedited ex parte basis or after a full evidentiary hearing to separate individuals that are in a mental health or emotional crisis from the firearms that they have access to. It is a tool that has been around for a couple of decades in the country, is fairly new in Minnesota. It is mostly used by law enforcement right now. 85% of the petitions have been brought by law enforcement. The other 15% are basically from family members. When they identify someone who appears to be in crisis, they're worried about that person's access or use of their own firearms and the danger that that might present to themselves, to their own household, or to others. They can go into court. A judge will evaluate the circumstances and the evidence to determine whether or not such a crisis and a risk exists, and can issue an order to get those firearms away from that individual. It is a very effective tool. It was used 138 times in Minnesota in 2024. It's already been used 175 times in 2025. And frankly, the greatest risk of firearm use is in greater Minnesota for suicide. So there are a lot of, I believe firmly, suicides have been prevented, and certainly so have homicides been prevented. This is a tool, however, which is only as good as its use. In my judgment, there are more people out there who may have exposure, knowledge, information that a friend or a family member is undergoing this kind of a crisis, has access to firearms, they need to be aware that this tool is available, either to go in with their own petition or to contact law enforcement and ask for this kind of an order. So this bill would propose a public awareness campaign to make sure as many people as possible know that this is available and they can use it to help save lives. Almost every mass shooting, the person who is going to engage in it exhibits some signs, either on their social media or a comment that they've made to someone. I firmly believe we have saved lives, and a broader public awareness campaign would save more lives. So that is the sum and substance of that bill as well. So I'm happy to answer any questions at this time, but we have a long agenda and we're short on time and I'm prepared to move on.
Thank you, Chair Latz. Senator Draham.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Senator Latz, for the two bill ideas. Just real quick on the fiscal end of it, is your fiscal note on the civil commitment?
You know, I don't, Senator Draham, Madam Chair, Senator Draham, I don't have that number in front of me right now. It was included in the funding proposal, but we didn't get the political consensus to pass it in the last session.
Okay, thank you. I was just, you know, I worked a lot on the mental health, as you know, yes. And what we were trying to do at that time was to get more practitioners and more beds and just more access available, and that takes funding, of course, and being on the finance committee, we always look at, you know, how are we going to pay for this and how are we going to pay for it long term. So I was just curious what the cost was and on either bill, actually. So.
Well, Madam Chair, Senator Draham, the public awareness campaign can be as broad or as narrow as we have funding available for that. But my recollection, I'm going to work off of my memory here, was that the two staff positions in the Attorney General's office from the original fiscal note, we had, there was 4, and we trimmed that down to 2, 1 at a more senior level and 1 at an administrative support level. It was under $500,000 a year to have that office and staff up and running on an ongoing basis. I don't remember the exact numbers, however.
Members, any other questions for Senator Latz and his two proposals? All right.
Thank you.
Yes, so then next we'll have Senator Bolden, who has the firearm safety training requirement bill. Senator Bolden.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And work group members. This bill, I am here presenting on behalf of Senator Mann, who is not able to be here this morning, is grounded in a simple but powerful idea. If you are going to own a firearm, you should know how to use it safely. Senate File 511 requires that anyone purchasing or taking ownership of a firearm in Minnesota must first complete basic firearm safety training. The training must include safe handling and storage, suicide and injury prevention, legal responsibilities of firearm ownership, and a live fire qualification to demonstrate competency. The bill also requires that a record of this training be maintained by both parties to the sale for 10 years. This record includes the firearm serial number, proof of training, and identification of both buyer and seller. These records must be made available to law enforcement if requested as part of a criminal investigation. I want to be clear, this bill does not prevent law-abiding Minnesotans from owning firearms. It simply ensures that those who do are trained, informed, and accountable. We require training and licensing to drive a car. We require safety courses for hunting. It is entirely responsible and reasonable to expect the same level of preparation for owning a deadly weapon. This bill also includes common sense exemptions for law enforcement, licensed dealers, antique firearms, and transfers through estates or auctions. Gun ownership comes with serious responsibilities. This bill helps ensure that every firearm owner in Minnesota is equipped with the knowledge and skills to handle that responsibility safely for themselves, their families, and our communities. And with that, I'm happy to take questions.
Thanks, Senator Bolden. Any questions for Senator Bolden? Senator Lucero, and then Howe.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Senator Bolden. I definitely appreciate discussing any ideas, and I know this is not your bill, but I appreciate you sitting in. So you cited two examples, licensing a car and licensing a hunting as examples, but neither of those are rights. Those are both privileges. And so do you have a concern, given the track record of several attempts to impose infringements on constitutional rights that have been struck down by courts in this state and in other states across the country recently? Do you have concerns that trying to put conditions on rights, such as enumerated in the Bill of Rights, would be struck down?
Senator Bolden.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Senator Lucero, for the question. I don't. I think, as we are talking about safety and what we can do as a body to help prevent gun violence, which is preventable, which is a public health crisis, I think this is a very reasonable option. Again, it's not preventing anyone from owning a firearm. It is simply saying if you are purchasing a deadly weapon, an item that can kill people, you should be trained in how to do that safely.
Senator Lucero, follow-up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm not opposed to training. I think everybody should go through any amount of training that they feel is necessary in order to have that responsibility, 100%. But where I do have a concern is we have a constitutional right, and it is the responsibility of the legislative body to make proposals and to have those conversations within the framework of those rights. So there are boundaries of which we as a legislative branch can operate, and we are bound by the Constitution. And again, there is a track record of such provisions similar to this that try to regulate outside the boundaries of the Constitution that are being struck down. And so, Madam Chair and Senator Bolden, we just need to keep that in mind, that we don't want to submit proposals that are blatantly unconstitutional, such as having a prerequisite to exercising a right to go through certain steps. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Howe.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Senator Bolden. I just got two questions. One is, many of our youth go through a firearm safety course when they're 11 or 12 years old. Is that the same type of instruction we're talking about?
Senator Bolden.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the question. I think it would depend on what that training is. I sort of enumerated the items that are required in this bill of what that training must include. We'll also note, according to the bill, that training must occur within 1 year of purchase of the firearm. And so depending on when that training happens, if they're 11, then no, it wouldn't count for purchasing a firearm at the age of 18. But depending on what the content is, it may be similar as long as it includes the items that I described.
Senator Howe.
Thank you for the follow-up. So you're saying this would be almost a continuous training event for someone that's owned numerous, and every time they go out to purchase one, every year they have to go, if they buy one on an annual basis, as some folks do when they see a good deal, they have to go through that training within the year of purchase?
Senator Bolden.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will have to verify this, but my understanding is that, yes, in order to meet the requirements, the training needs to occur within 1 year of purchase of the firearm.
One more follow-up. Thank you. And Senator Bolden, I know this isn't your bill, so it's kind of, but I see that they have employment as a peace officer, completion of firearms. I don't see any exemption for someone in the military or someone in corrections. Is that because we are going to make them continue to do this training?
Senator Bolden.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Senator Howe. You are correct. There are some, as I said, common sense exemptions. I think, there's openness to discuss if there should be additional exemptions to that for things that make sense.
All right, members, any other questions? Senator Latz.
Madam Chair, just with regard to the constitutional question, we should note that in all of these gun issues, particularly that would regulate firearms, that the Heller decision by the U.S. Supreme Court, written by Justice Scalia, specifically, explicitly stated that the Second Amendment is not absolute, that in fact reasonable regulations are and would be constitutional. Now, we can have a follow-up discussion on what regulation does or does not fit within that parameter, but the concept of regulating access to firearms is not anathema to the Second Amendment. They can and do and should coexist harmoniously.
Okay, so next we'll have your other bill, Senator Bolden, that you're also presenting on behalf of Senator Mann, Office of Gun Violence Prevention Establishment.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. And so, yes, I am grateful to Senator Mann and happy to bring this forward on her behalf. This bill would establish a dedicated Office of Gun Violence Prevention within the Minnesota Department of Health. This office would be a centralized, data-driven, and public health-oriented hub to coordinate our state's efforts to reduce gun violence and its devastating impacts on our communities. This bill is about people. It's about the lives lost, the families shattered, and the communities traumatized by gun violence, as we have heard here this morning. Whether through suicide, domestic violence, community violence, or unintentional shootings. So this bill does the following. It creates a permanent office within the Department of Health, led by a director with expertise in gun violence prevention. It would collect and report data on gun-related incidents and deaths in Minnesota, helping us to understand the scope and nature of this problem. It would promote evidence-based strategies to reduce gun violence, including public health campaigns and community partnerships. It would support victims and survivors, ensuring they are not left behind in the aftermath of tragedy. And we know that group of victims and survivors is growing every day. It would coordinate with other state agencies, including the Department of Public Safety, and serves as a resource to the legislature on policy solutions. This office would not only help us respond to gun violence, it will help us prevent it. By investing in research, data, and community engagement, we can move from reactive to proactive, from fragmented efforts to coordinated action. And importantly, this bill includes an annual reporting requirement, ensuring transparency and accountability to the legislature and to the public. We know that gun violence is not inevitable. It is preventable. But prevention requires infrastructure, coordination, and sustained investment. That's what this bill provides. Again, happy to take questions.
Thank you, and I think we have enough time for the public if anybody wants to testify on either of those bills. Seeing there's someone behind Senator Bolden. If you want to come up to the testifier table and introduce yourself to the committee.
Hello. I am Nick Harlberg from 32B delegate, just coming to testify on the firearms safety bill, which you're requiring training for. I want to state that I am a father of three. Two of my children go to a private Catholic school, and I was gutted to my core to see my children attend their first school service with the amount of armed police there at their school. This destroyed me inside, and never in my life did I think I would be here today with you, and I want to thank you for that. I want to personally thank my local police and fire for being there and being there every day forward. What has changed in our society? Has the gun changed or the people? Why is it years ago you could go to actual school and do skeet shooting and go home? What has changed? What has changed for my children in this future? I do not know. Is an inanimate object in a room, a safe, or a closet something that has changed, or the people? The other day, another school shooting happened in Colorado, a state that has banned assault weapons. Another shooting of children by children. This is happening everywhere, Children are being radicalized online. Shooters are taking a host of drugs, and in some cases, they are broadcasting what they're about to do online. We have red flag laws in this state and extreme protection orders, yet nothing stopped this maggot from doing what he did. What has changed? I think there is a much broader issue happening here. Charlie Kirk was assassinated with a deer rifle, not an assault weapon, a dad's deer rifle. Again, by an individual that was radicalized online. Every gun can become an assault weapon because it depends on the individual, not the object, and how he uses it. I ask these things because I see we will now require training and a passage of a test to obtain a firearm. I now have to take a test and pass in order to exercise my right under the Bill of Rights and the Constitution of the United States. My question is, will we ever allow this for the First Amendment? Will we ask you to take a test under the First Amendment of the United States and the Bill of Rights to see if you could speak freely, like Charlie did? How much is this test? What are the guidelines for this test? What administration results are from this test? Who archives these tests? I have to ask, since we live in such a polarized time, what questions will be on this test? And if you are, let's say, of the opposing party, or maybe of the opposing religious belief, et cetera, et cetera. Looking at the cost for your income, if you are on the lower ladder of income in the state, in order to obtain a license that they are looking to pass, you would have to have a concealed weapons permit. This would cost about $120. Then, if you are not a current firearms owner, you're going to have to rent a firearm and rent ammunition and use that, and then after 30 days, you would be given your right to have a firearm. What if you're a single female under threat of your life from an ex-boyfriend? What if you can't wait 30 days? What if you are a senior citizen threatened by individuals in your neighborhood and on a fixed income? What then? I ask us here in this body to look at broader issues of what's happening in our society. What is happening to our children? We must listen to one another with love and respect. Excuse me. We must remember our rights, all of our rights, not just a few. I pray for the families impacted by the shootings. I pray that our Heavenly Father end the violence and anger within our society and heal our fractured nation. Thank you. Thank you, Senator Latz.
Thank you. Is Catherine Diamond in the audience? If you want to come and testify for the Office of Violence Prevention, the creation of it. And Senator Lucero has, I think, a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I would just want to thank that gentleman. I don't know what his last name was, but this entire summer, I've attended many events throughout my community and throughout the state. And they've been echoing the words that were just said. What has changed? It's not been the firearms. It's not been the access to firearms. What has changed, and these are the conversations I've been having as recently as just this past weekend. It is the innocence of children. It is the hearts and minds of these violent actors and evil within the people. And that's why I'll echo what I said earlier. We need to return to a former state of valuing life. And so people like this gentleman are asking that question, what has changed? And clearly it's the hearts and minds, because the other variables have remained a constant. And it's the hearts and minds of those that seek to harm others with their violence, perpetrating their evil. And I'll conclude with, you also cited a very real fact. It wasn't too long ago that it was the commonplace to bring firearms to school. In some cases, storing them in backs of the classroom. In many cases, storing them in the automobile in the parking lot. And we never had these tragedies. So what changed is the question that this work group, this legislature, and those of us across the state are asking in order to get to the root cause, to have sensible and real solutions to stop the violence. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Catherine? Senator Bolden?
Madam Chair, I believe she is here not to testify, but to answer questions if there are any.
Okay. Members, any questions for Senator Bolden or her? Senator Clark?
Thank you, Chair Mohammed. In regard to the Office of Violence Prevention, I see that we put it under the Department of Health with annual reports. I guess as we think through this, I would encourage us to look at how it's not just a report. We get a lot of reports here and they sit on shelves. And so what is it that may make an Office of Violence Prevention something that actually has both a report and an action? So I don't know if you've seen models that works on versus just a report on the shelf. That's what I'd be looking for in making sure this works well.
Senator Bolden?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Senator Clark. I appreciate that because I agree with you. Action is what's needed. I think this will help, us in the legislature. That is our role and responsibility. And I think that's, the conversation we are having is what action should we take? And we absolutely should be taking action. I think, and I agree with you, and I think this will help give us information to determine what actions are, useful, effective, necessary. So I very much appreciate your comments and suggestion.
Thank you. Anything else, members? No? Thank you, Senator Bolden. Next, we'll have Senator Latz, and he'll be introducing a bill on behalf of Senator Hoffman for increased penalties for anyone who's impersonating to be a police officer.
Madam Chair and members, on behalf of Senator Hoffman, I'm presenting his proposal to increase the penalties for impersonating a peace officer. As I'm sure you all know, the shooter, the killer in the legislative shootings earlier this summer was wearing a very lifelike mask that obscured his identity and was outfitted in a police uniform and was driving a vehicle that was a typical standard issue SUV that is used by many law enforcement agencies and actually had license plates that had been printed that said police on them. In other words, his modus operandi was to appear to be a legitimate peace officer approaching the doors of the Hortman family and the Hoffman family and intending to have approached other doors as well. So Senator Hoffman took a look back at the statutes that already make it illegal to impersonate a peace officer and is proposing increased penalties for that. 609.4751 was formerly a misdemeanor for a person who intended to mislead another into believing that the impersonator is actually an officer, and it bumps up the penalty from the misdemeanor to a felony, a 2-year felony, so it's the maximum penalty, just the act of trying to mislead someone else into thinking they're a real police officer. For those who do so and commit crimes which are already in statute, gaining access to a public building or directing another person to act or refrain from acting, operating a motor vehicle that's marked with the words police and similar language, or otherwise trying to imitate a peace officer's vehicle, that penalty would increase from a gross misdemeanor to a felony, and it would be a 5-year felony. And then the proposal is to increase the penalty for repeat offenses within 5 years of each other from a 2-year felony to a 10-year felony, with also concomitant increases in the fines that would be associated as maximums following a conviction and for sentencing. So obviously the intent is to utilize these increased penalties as a deterrent, so people will understand that there's more serious consequences if they try to do this, and secondly, if in fact they commit those offenses, to make it possible for a judge to sentence them to longer terms, or actually terms in prison and then longer terms in prison as well. So there's an article that has been distributed, I believe, or is going to be distributed to members here from the Star Tribune relating to 2 instances in which a person committed offenses while impersonating an officer. One includes the shooter of the Hortmans and the Hoffmans, but also includes a different case as well. So I'm happy to answer any questions, but this, I expect, will be part of a package brought forward for consideration before the legislature.
Thank you, Chair Latz. Is there anyone that wants to come and give a testimony from the public audience? No? Senator Howe?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Senator Latz, I just, as I look at this, I just got a question for you, because I often act as I still carry a badge that has fire marshal on it, and I many times do carry. I just want to make sure we make some allowance for those of us that are in that capacity, that there's some allowance for those of us that are in an official capacity that would not end up violating this law. If you can, we can work on that another time, but that's my concern.
Senator Latz.
Madam Chair, Senator Howe, the statute requires that the impersonation be false. So if you are in fact legitimately a fire marshal, you would not run afoul of this law.
Thank you. Members, any other questions? All right.
Thank you.
Great. Awesome. So the next we'll have Senator Gustafson, and she's got 2 bills. We'll start with whichever one that you would like. Senator Gustafson. Senator Gustafson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just pulling up my folder here. I think we'll start with binary trigger ban. Members of the committee, thank you for being able to review this bill. I come before you convinced now more than ever that banning binary triggers is not just a policy choice, but a necessary step to preserve public safety and common sense to our firearm laws. A binary trigger, for those who don't know, is a device that allows a semi-automatic firearm to fire 1 round when the trigger is pulled and another round when the trigger is released. This dual action fundamentally increases the rate of fire in a way that ordinary semi-automatic triggers do not, and it skirts the line of what most people reasonably expect is legal and safe. There are currently 8 other states that have already recognized that binary triggers pose a risk and have taken action. The laws show that a growing national consensus, when devices increase the rate of fire beyond what is necessary for legitimate uses like hunting, target shooting, or self-defense, they cross a threshold. We do not need military-like firepower in civilian hands. This proposal doesn't undermine the rights of safe, lawful gun owners. It targets a specific device that turns otherwise legal firearms into something much more dangerous. This bill came before us, for those who remember, because of a law enforcement request, quite frankly, in Burnsville. 2 police officers responding to a domestic violence situation, and a first responder, a paramedic, were shot with a gun that had a binary trigger on it. There was also a young law enforcement police officer, in fact, in Fargo, who was also assassinated with the same type of trigger. To protect our children, to protect our law enforcement, our neighbors, and our peace of mind, we must draw the line here. Other states have already done it, and I urge us to give it the support it needs. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone who wants to testify? Seeing none. Members, any questions for Senator Gustafson? Oh, there's somebody coming. All right. Well, now you get all the time in the world. No, I'm kidding.
Thank you. My name is Leah Condis. I lead the Minneapolis local group of Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America. I've been sitting here all morning listening to people hearkening back to a time, apparently the Garden of Eden. And I would just like to point out, I know we have people here of many faiths, maybe no faiths, but in the book of Genesis, we ruined it. Human beings ruined it, right? Cain murdered Abel. This is in the Bible. I would also like to point out the 10 Commandments. Thou shalt not kill. I've been doing a little research here during my remarks too. Second Amendment, a well-regulated militia. This was ratified in 1791. Yes, things have changed. There were no firearms in the Garden of Eden that I was aware of. There were firearms in 1791, but maybe we didn't have these, binary triggers. So things have changed, and I don't want to hear any more this or that. It's this and that. It's mental health and it is common sense gun laws. It's both these things. Stop being silly. Don't weaponize hate. I was happy to hear a previous testifier defending women and the poor. Love that. Yes to all of that. That is all I want to say this morning. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Lucero.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was going to speak to the bill before us, but just in regards to the remarks of the testifier and keeping in mind that evil is real. Shortly after the Garden of Eden, the first person to be murdered was Abel by his brother Cain. And it wasn't with a firearm, it was with a stone. And evil is what we need to focus on here and to combat and to stop. So just reminding members of that. Madam Chair and Senator Gustafson, thank you for the conversation. So this is before us, this is familiar language. Can you just give us some background about why this is before us again?
Senator Gustafson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The district court ruled that the procedural process in which the ban was passed, not the ban itself, was unconstitutional. So it has nothing to do with the policy you see before you. It was the bill that it was included in that got across the finish line. So that's an important distinction. The triggers were used in like I said, the Burnsville shooting. They should be banned. We're hoping that this time we can do it with some Republican support.
Thank you. Senator Lucero.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I appreciate that. Process is important. We need to do things per the Constitution. And one of the things that when we were debating this language a couple years ago was the unconstitutionality of the multiple subject in a single bill. Those voices weren't hearkened to then, and it was pushed through in an unlawful process. So I would urge Madam Chair and Senator Gustafson that as we continue any of these proposals, that they are done so following the constitutional boundaries rather than putting politics ahead of process and just ramming things through for them later to be found unconstitutional in the process they were passed. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Chair, if I could respond. Senator Lucero, this bill passed the Senate, passed the House, and just needed to have the conference committee approved. That's all we needed to vote on. So there was none of that discussion when it passed the Senate with only Democrat support. And it was not about the policy, as we've stated. You're talking about a completely separate situation that happened about where that bill was included at the final passage, not about the actual bill. The bill passed the Senate on its own as a standalone bill, and it passed the House, and we just needed to vote on the conference committee report. So just wanted to make that important distinction because, as you said, process matters.
Thank you. Senator Matthews.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Senator Gustafson. You and I had a back and forth on this bill, and my position's still the same on it. I want to clarify that I believe that what the court reached in this decision didn't even touch on the merits of the language. So I don't think it's quite right to say that it was approved on its underlying merits of the language. I think the correct argument is that the merits were not even considered because the lawsuit was only focused on the fact that this was put inside of one of the largest omnibus bills that was in the state. So I think that clarification is important here in this case. I do want to ask, and in our back and forth on this bill previously, to piggyback on some of the comments that have been said, I think we all agree that we need to go after and punish those who are doing evil and who are committing crimes in Minnesota. And I think some of the difficulty is, well, how much do we impact good people that are law-abiding, that are not going to be out committing these types of crimes? How much do they need to be impacted in order to feel justified in our mind for our efforts to go after those with criminal intent? I think that was a pretty significant problem that this bill was going after in my mind back then. And I want to ask, why is your language now including the language that the law is to be reenacted retroactively and without interruption? I'll ask that because I'll tell you what I think I read that as. It reads to me that there's a law-abiding person. That was our back and forth where I was saying this law is just intending to criminalize people who are otherwise law-abiding. This reads to me like there's a prosecution of an otherwise law-abiding person that you're still trying to get at. So I'm wondering why, instead of just the copy-paste text of the law before, why do we have a proposal here directing the state to reenact it retroactively and without interruption from January 1st, 2025?
Madam Chair, and thank you, Senator Matthews. I think because this bill was not based on the merit, I just want to address that quickly. If it wasn't something that was sort of picked out by the Minnesota Gun Caucus and other special interest groups, they would have also gone after the straw purchase. So this was something that was just particular to this one part of that bill that they had an issue with. And I would say that this bill, once again, passed the Senate and passed the House. It had the Senate support, it had the House support, maybe not from you and your party, but the majority of the Senate and the majority of the House. So I think the idea is to go back to what had passed and go forward from that moment on.
Senator Matthews, follow-up.
Madam Chair, just a quick follow-up. And I appreciate that. I don't think it quite gets at the question that I'm asking, but I think I'll leave it at that for now. I just see it as one of the solutions that's just looking after how we can go after items that people are already owning, people who are law-abiding, people who aren't intending to go out and commit these heinous crimes, and find ways to make prosecutions against them. Mm-hmm. I dealt with that for another constituent of mine who had 3 years of his life interrupted by something else that he just got relief from the Supreme Court about. And this feels like targeting law-abiding Minnesotans. While we can't even enforce mandatory minimums of people actually committing crimes with guns. And that's a lot of my frustration on issues that we deal with like this. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Senator Lucero.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I appreciate Senator Matthews drawing that to my attention. I did not see that this had a provision in here to retroactively apply an enactment. And my question, Madam Chair, and to Senator Gustafson, does this not expressly violate the constitutional prohibition on ex post facto law by taking something that was legal and then retroactively making it illegal to attempt to apply a criminal element to it?
Senator Gustafson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to be honest with you. I am not a constitutional lawyer, so that is a subject that we can dive deeper into. That's fine. I think what the point is that some of this is being discussed as a way to give people an out who don't want to see this passed. 8 other states have this, so they're not being overturned. We know that this is constitutional. It's just in the manner that it got across the finish line was challenged in the Minnesota Supreme Court. That's fine. I don't want us to get distracted from the point that here in Minnesota, we passed a binary trigger ban. And that's what we would like to reintroduce. And if you want to talk about the retro dates, we can bring that up with a constitutional lawyer. But please don't let us distract us from the fact that this was brought to us because law enforcement were killed. It also puts the regular public in danger as well. And it's something that would prevent more mass casualties. That's what we're trying to accomplish here. I hope that helps.
Senator Lucero, follow up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And again, we want to have real solutions to make safer schools, safer communities, and expanded healthcare or mental health options. But we have to follow the process. We have to follow the Constitution. And as we have these very important conversations to come up with real solutions, we cannot violate the Constitution, what's already struck down because it violated the Constitution. And now to have another proposal that blatantly violates the Constitution is not a direction we want to go. We want real solutions to make Minnesota safer. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Senator Gustafson?
Yep. Just wanted to reiterate to the public that it was not the merit of this bill that was ruled unconstitutional.
Great. Thank you. We'll move on to your next bill, safe storage.
Yes. Thank you again, members of the committee. Safe storage of firearms is one of the most urgent and yet broadly agreeable measures that we can take to reduce the needless death, injury, and tragedy. Too many accidents, suicides, and thefts begin with unsecured firearm left loaded, left unlocked. Each of those tragedies can be prevented simply by ensuring that the gun is stored, unloaded, locked in a secure storage unit when not in use, or loaded and locked in a secured storage unit. Sorry, made that distinction. We are not alone in this approach. A number of states have already strong laws that require or at least criminally penalize failures of secure storage and child access prevention. I also want to bring up that in addition to the several states that have passed it, we also see some pretty red states that have passed this too. Florida, not known for being a very blue or liberal state, has better gun laws in some of these situations than we do here in Minnesota. In fact, they have a safe storage law in place. So these are not radical laws, they're common sense. We require things like life jackets, car seats, child-proof medicine caps, safety locks on chemicals. We expect responsibility in every other domain where danger is present, and firearms demand no less. The bill's provisions, including requirements for locking devices or secure storage units, exemptions legitimate for sporting or law enforcement use, they strike the right balance. As I go back in my memories of how we presented this bill back in 2024, this was drafted with lots of voices around the table, including law enforcement, including gun rights groups, and including Republicans. This had broad consensus, unfortunately, did not get across the finish line. But I think we should join those states that have already acted and passed safe storage into law. In fact, since the last time I brought forward this bill, there have been 2 notable cases in the news. A 4-year-old in Brooklyn Center accidentally shot himself in August after finding a gun in his uncle's room. A 12-year-old in St. Paul accidentally shot himself in the head in August. And this is just 2 examples of many, many that are both here in the state and across the country since I last brought this bill forward. We do know that this will save lives, and most of those happen to be children, which I think is one of the reasons we're here today, to find things that we can do to help them save the lives of our kids. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, any questions for Senator Gustafson? Seeing none, thank you so much, Senator Gustafson. Next, we have Senator Marty. who will speak to his comprehensive package on gun violence.
Thank you, chairs and members of the working group. John Marty, and want to talk about comprehensive gun violence prevention. And you will have, well, I've been listening to the whole hearing upstairs, and wow, you've had some very powerful, compelling testimony. And I think we should thank the witnesses for their courage in coming forward and testifying. We're here, as we all recognize, because of Fletcher and Harper, two precious children who died from gun violence, and for all the other school children and adults, domestic violence victims, public officials, everyone's at risk. And we need to start with thoughts and prayers for Fletcher and Harper and all those affected by gun violence. But we need more than that as well. We need to do far more in mental health care. For the last 15 years, I've authored legislation to provide health care to everyone without exception, including comprehensive mental health and substance use treatment. It's long overdue that we ensure that all of our neighbors have the care they need, not just for cancer and other physical ailments, but also for mental health needs. We have to do that. Today, I'm here to speak on the need for a comprehensive approach to gun regulation. You should have a draft of the current version in your packets. This was first introduced several years ago, but first for the upcoming special session, I want to stress the importance of Senator Mohammed's bill banning assault weapons and large capacity magazines. She articulated how that legislation will make a difference. Senator Latz and I and many members of the legislature have been pushing for that other gun safety legislation for years. And her ban on assault weapons and large capacity magazines isn't new. It was introduced in 2024, wasn't heard because we recognized it didn't have a chance of passing at the time. But if that legislation did have a hearing, if it did pass, it would have reduced the severity of the attack. It might have prevented the attack, the deaths of Fletcher and Harper. Please, my plea for the special session is please let's pass our bill now to prevent these future tragedies. But we also need to look a broad look at the importance of gun regulation. I'm not suggesting that the working group recommend for the special session we take up all these issues that are in this bill, but we deserve a chance to hear them and debate them, give them full consideration and vote. If not in the special session, let's consider them in 2026. It's not like the public isn't heavily engaged on these issues. Pro and con, they are very vocal and very visible. They're not afraid to discuss them, and as their elected officials, we owe it to them that we debate them and vote on them as well. Because of the length of this hearing, I'm only going to briefly mention a few of the provisions of this bill, which all deserve serious consideration. Like with regulations we put on motor vehicles and driving, it's reasonable to require training and testing and insurance of gun owners. This legislation would implement a licensing and registration system for firearms to make ownership and possession safer and prevent criminals and untrained people from using them. Included in the packet with my summary comparison of safety regulations for guns and cars, and point out that regulations do save lives. The regulations we put on motor vehicle design, use, licensing of drivers, everything else, those have had a huge impact. Over the last century, they've cut the death toll per mile driven by over 90%. We'd have more than 10 times as many people being killed on our roads if we hadn't implemented those regulations. Gun regulations are almost non-existent, but the states that have some significant ones, the ones that have less weak laws on gun regulation, have far less than half the deaths from gun violence per capita than the states with the weakest laws, even though the states with the stronger laws happen to have the bigger, quote, more violent cities. The death toll from gun violence is less than half in those states than the states like the South Dakotas and Mississippis and the states with virtually no gun laws. So this bill would require you to get, in order to possess a firearm, you'd need a license, which would require training and safety, knowledge of the laws related to firearms, safe storage, strategies for de-escalating potentially deadly situations, and passage an exam on the training. Would require the owner to have liability insurance. This complements Minnesota's universal background check law, which was passed a couple years ago, which would be required for licensing. Existing owners would need the license, but would be exempted from training requirements. Firearms would also need to be registered with re-registration when they're transferred to new owners. This bill contains the ban on assault weapons, large capacity ammunition magazines, 50 caliber and larger guns, undetectable guns, all of which are in Senator Mohammed's bill. And again, I'm urging you to pass this and to push this forward for the current special session. This bill finally has several other restrictions on who can carry a gun and where they can carry it, prohibits carrying guns in the Capitol and city halls and other public buildings. It's appropriate we have very vigorous debate here, but bringing guns into the room, they've been used for intimidation many times. That's not a Second Amendment right. Prohibiting guns at the Capitol, other places, making a crime of carrying a gun in private establishments that ban guns. If I go into a restaurant that bans guns and I carry one, I am not committing a crime under our current law. We give shopping malls, other businesses more ability to ban guns. We'd establish a crime of gun trafficking. We limit purchases to no more than 1 gun per month. Who knows if there's a delay in which the killer in the last crime gets their guns, maybe it would give us a chance to intervene somehow. Require safe storage of firearms, require prompt treating of lost or stolen firearms. All of this there's more provisions as well, but I'm going to stop there. This is not ignoring the Second Amendment. All these provisions are narrowly tailored to meet the compelling state interest in preventing the deaths of kids like Fletcher and Harper, preventing the murder of women who are victims of domestic violence. Protecting Minnesotans is a compelling state interest, and it does not put an undue burden on gun owners. Those who argue that we shouldn't have any regulation because it has an impact on them are essentially saying there should be no regulation of a person who is seeking to acquire a gun for carjacking or armed robbery or murder or any crime until after they've committed their violent acts. That's not good enough. If we have done some of these things earlier, we could have prevented some of these tragedies. If we move forward now, we can prevent more. And with that, again, I urge your taking a look at these, and I urge us to take a serious consideration, probably for the ones outside of the ones you're looking forward for the special session, but look forward to that in the coming session.
Thank you, Senator Marty. We don't have a lot of time, so we'll go on to the next person, Senator Gruenhagen, with your policy.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, committee members, and thank you for being on the committee to take a look at this issue. I would like to just start by saying, you know, it was a terrible tragedy. When somebody dies of gun violence, it is a terrible tragedy. And I think we all agree we want to get to sound solutions to try to never have this happen again, especially to children. So I want to thank the medical personnel that worked on the children, the parents, the anguish they must have suffered. I just can't even have no words to express if it had happened to my children or something like that. So we need to have a robust discussion on this issue, because all of us, everybody in this room, and I think the majority of, or 99% of Minnesotans do not want this to happen again. So with that, I will start my testimony. You know, we talked about different types of solutions here. I will start out with armed police officers in the school. I know that's reprehensible to some people, and I wish we weren't at that state, but I served on the school board for 16 years, and during those 16 years, we had not a shooting, but we had students doing violence to other students in the high school. Nobody came out of their classroom to stop it. No administrator did anything. And the result was at least one of those students wound up in the hospital. So we did pass a law based on the high school recommendation of putting a armed police officer in our school. And I got a lot of flack having my business downtown, I belong to Rotary, about that. And I think that was in February. Well, in April, Columbine happened. And there wasn't another word, okay? So and also a group of teachers didn't like that to start with. But in the end, after a year, all I got was accolades for having that armed police officer in the school. We didn't have another violent episode where somebody went to the hospital. So it was effective. And I would just ask the committee to think that through, because I think all of our schools need security. My understanding was non-public schools did ask for money for security when we had an $18 billion surplus. Unfortunately, for some reason, that was rejected, and maybe the committee can look into that. The other thing I would say is I have done quite a bit of research on these mass shootings, both when I was a school board and member and also here. And I do think if you do the research, sometimes these mass shooters look for gun-free zones.
Senator Gruenhagen, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you're here to testify in your proposal relating to the article that you presented to us, and we are already over committee time.
Yep.
So,
but this is an important issue. Just let me, I'll be right to it.
If you can finish up your other comment in 30 seconds and go on to your proposal, please, and that's the only testimony we're going to be able to take.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I think you need to look into eliminating gun-free zones. We need to support the police. Some make mistakes and need to pay a consequence, but we should not defund the police and demonize them. Second thing, the article that Senator Latz referred to, I co-authored an article in 2019 for the Minnesota Physician. The co-author was, you can find it on the internet on one of my websites if you want to read the whole thing, but the co-author was Dr. Chris Foley. He was a lecturer at the University of Minnesota Pharmacological College. He has well experienced with the use of SRI drugs. And I'm going to read his exact quote, just a short paragraph. It says, the so-called SRI drugs, long in use for the management of depression and anxiety, he mentions Prozac, Zoloft, etc., in fact, have very little scientific basis for their actions. They are routinely given for anxiety, depression, particularly in children who suffer various types of post-traumatic stress disorder from abusive homes, injuries, medical conditions, and other factors. There is very little evidence that they are safe or effective on children. In fact, they are boxed with warnings regarding both homicidal and suicidal ideations. Think about that, members. On several of these drugs that are commonly used on children. A recent expose disclosed that a majority of mass shootings have been perpetrated by individuals taking these drugs. The breathtaking elements here is the utter lack of scientific scrutiny for safety and efficacy, particularly when given on a long-term basis, more than 6 months, end of quote. I also have a pharmacist with about 30 years of experience who sent me the warnings on these SRI drugs. And basically the warnings that I'm just summarizing, you can do your own research, the warnings say it produces suicidal and severe mood swings and aggression, and it should not be used on the majority of children. And yet, when I was on the school board, we were giving it out like candy. This needs to be looked into, okay? Because the person back here who said something has changed, in my opinion, this is one of the things that has changed. We're using these psychotropic drugs on minor children without due scientific evidence, with terrible warnings and side effects. And you can research Dr. Chris Foley. He was an expert on this. Secondly, in the case of the shooter, a judge has sealed the health records. So we cannot find out right now what medication he was actually on. And by the way, there's articles out there by the shooter. He was tired of being trans. I wish I was never brainwashed. New York Post.
All right, Senator Gruenhagen, we're going to have you finish your testimony and not go down that road, please.
I find it very disturbing that the committee doesn't want to hear a robust discussion with different perspectives, okay? And then I'll bring it on the Senate floor if I have to, okay?
You will be entitled to do that, Senator Gruenhagen, but the testimony today that you submitted for consideration has to do with the use of the SRIs.
Exactly, that's what I'm trying to get at.
And that's all that we're going to focus on with your testimony, please.
Okay. Secondly, I would say that, you know, okay, you don't want me to talk about transgenderism, but
That's correct, Senator.
RFK is proposing a ban on guns to transgender.
All right, Senator
folks.
Gruenhagen, thank you for your testimony.
All right.
We're concluded now with this.
Yeah, we're over-medicating the children. If you want any bipartisan, especially from me, you're going to include this type of information, because this is what's, in my opinion, instigating a lot of this, and we're doing it blindly and giving out like candy to our children. Please care about the children and listen to opposing views. It's a sign of immaturity not to hear opposing views. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator Gruenhagen. Members, that concludes the presentations to the committee. We're going to wrap this up now. If any members wish to make any closing comments, and then we will close for today. Let me know, Senator Drahan.
Thank you, Senator Latz, or Chair Latz. You know, I've enjoyed the conversation today and hearing from the people. I think it's very important. I think we should always try to hear any subject. And I think there's always different solutions out there. So I hope we keep an open mind. I know this working group is targeted towards the gun violence. In my perspective, it's about how do we protect our children? And what can we do to not have another incident like we just had? And I hope as we move towards special session, we can broaden our scope a little more than just on the gun violence portion, because I do think there are other things we should be looking at and researching, one being marijuana, prescription drugs, and you know, I know NAMI had real concerns with us legalizing marijuana, and I do think there is some data there that needs to be looked at. I like some of the topics that we talked about today, and I appreciate the discussion. But I think we need to expand what we're going to do and probably spend a little more time on the mental health and the school portion. So just wondering for Wednesday, I saw a list come out just, I think, last night or this morning. But can you just give us a broad overview of what our plans are for Wednesday and the timeline for that?
Yes, Senator Drahan. The intent Wednesday at 9 a.m. here in this room, room 1200, is to give the working group an opportunity to consider the proposals that have been made today. The idea was to do intake, if you will, today, so we can have what's in front of us. And then we'll have a discussion and see if we can find any consensus on what we might be able to recommend. It might involve some votes on the working group to see whether there is support, you know, for it. Obviously, whatever we do is not binding on anyone. It's just an idea of consensus or recommendation, and see what happens. We also know that there are discussions going on at a different level between the governor's office and legislative leadership as to the scope and content of any special session, and we're not involved in that. But the point here was to take some public testimony and to get proposals out on the table. I know there are other proposals out there, and you know, there's a lot of stuff a lot of range that we could go to here. The point today was to try to do the intake on some proposals for us to consider as a working group, and then consider those on Wednesday. And the idea, again, on Wednesday will be to conclude by about noon, just so you can plan your schedules accordingly. And we will have the list you referred to. We'll have the same documents available on Wednesday, so you can take your stuff with you today, or if you want, it'll be available on Wednesday as well. Any other concluding remarks or questions before we move on here? Senator Bolden and then Senator Westland.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am grateful for the opportunity for this work group, and thank you to both chairs for pulling us together. It's unfortunate to end on a note of misinformation, but I want to refocus us on the gun violence aspect of this. I am both heartbroken and furious that we have to be here. I want to thank the testifiers from earlier in the hearing this morning who very powerfully brought their stories and their experience, and just I so greatly appreciate them being here through their trauma as they are still reeling, I have to think, from what they have been through. And as they described, you know, their children who are physically okay will carry that trauma with them forever. And so I really was struck by the courage of those families to, again, through their grief and their trauma, to come here and beg and demand for us to take action to keep their children and their families safe. The courage that they are putting forth every day to continue to push us and ask for action. The courage of the mother, as she described, running towards the gunshots. The courage of older children to lay over younger children to protect them. We should not be asking children to protect other children. We should be doing that. That is our responsibility. And so we have an opportunity to take action, and I just wonder, what will it take? How many children have to die before we take action? There shouldn't be any more. Gun violence is preventable. We have the tools, we have information. Gun violence is a public health crisis. It is an epidemic in this country. It is a uniquely American problem. Other countries have mental health issues. Other countries have social media. Other countries do not have more guns than people, and we do. So we have a responsibility to keep our children safe, and families and kids are coming to us and say, please, do something. And we should, and I hope we do. We have a responsibility to Fletcher and Harper to be sure that this does not happen again. And so to the families and citizens of Minnesota, the majority of which want common sense reforms, I am with you. Keep pushing us. We need to do something.
Senator Westland.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you again for bringing this group together. Thank you to my colleagues on the other side of the aisle for being here with us today. I imagine that in our capacity as legislators, this is probably going to go down as one of the hardest days for us in terms of testimony on a subject that just is heartbreaking. As I mentioned earlier, our approach to addressing gun violence has got to be a holistic, well-rounded approach. But we cannot talk about gun violence prevention without talking about guns. We've had some discussion about constitutionality, but the Second Amendment has never been universally subject to strict scrutiny. In fact, the U.S. Supreme Court frequently has used intermediate scrutiny, and now there's a made-up one about text and whatever, text and tradition. But the Second Amendment is not an unlimited right, just as the First Amendment is not an unlimited right. There is a responsibility that comes with free speech. I am concerned about the speech and the rhetoric that is circulating now after this most recent assassination of a man in broad daylight in front of 3,000 young people who are now going to be traumatized. We have legislators in this state who are now saying that people on my side of the aisle should be rounded up. We should be treated like the mob. I'm going to tell you that that kind of speech makes me and my colleagues less safe, and I'm asking us all to bring the temperature down. I am disgusted and horrified by what happened to Mr. Kirk. I didn't care anything else about the fact that a father and a husband was murdered in cold blood, and it re-traumatized me from what happened here in our state. It should not have happened. And I condemn it fully and completely. I want to talk about lawful gun owners because the Sandy Hook shooter was a lawful gun owner. The Pulse nightclub shooter was a lawful gun owner. The Las Vegas shooter was a lawful gun owner. The Minnesota assassin was a lawful gun owner. The Kirk assassin was a lawful gun owner. The Annunciation shooter was a lawful gun owner. They were lawful until the day they were not. They acquired weapons, and then in that moment when they decided to act with criminality and hate or whatever, they had the arsenal to do it. The bills that we will consider in special session, the bills we may consider in a regular session, none of them is going to completely eliminate gun deaths. And it is a straw man argument to say this law would not have prevented this incident. What we know is when we have a holistic approach on all of these topics, we are engaging in harm reduction. We are engaging in the reduction of risk, and that is what we should be about. And as Senator Bolden said, we have the tools, and the question is, will we have the will? Do we have the will? Do we have the will in this moment to act, and to act in a bipartisan way? Because I want to say this is not just the responsibility of Democrats. This is the responsibility of every person elected to represent their community, and our communities are crying for action. They want action, not words, action. And I'm going to repeat that I am all in, and I am all in, and I hope you will join me in being all in trying to do something so that we will not have families coming to us in the future and begging us to save their children.
Briefly, if you would, it's 12:30 and you've
Thank you,
already had
Mr.
an
Chair.
opportunity to speak a number of times. So.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have a responsibility to act, and we must do something. I look forward to the continued conversations on this, as I know my colleagues and I know the entire body does. We have a responsibility to act, getting tougher on violent criminals who use weapons while committing their crimes. We have a responsibility to act, helping schools enhance their site safety, including physical hardening, SROs, and threat detection tools. We have a responsibility to act, increasing access to mental health resources so we reach people facing mental health crises before they escalate to harming themselves and others. Thank you, Mr. Chair, Madam Chair. Thank you to all the testifiers as we continue to have these conversations to act responsibly. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Lucero. I'm just going to add a few concluding remarks. I heard a term this morning on the radio I hadn't heard before, which was nihilist violence. The act of violence not for any particular ideological reason, but rather just for the sake of violence and sort of destroying. Certainly we're seeing some of that, and we have to find ways to get at that. We have seen hate directed in multiple directions, often not with any ideological or philosophical consistency as well. And so one thing I want to put back on the table that I proposed about a week and a half ago or 2 weeks ago was a review of our anti-hate and anti-bias laws in Minnesota to see if there's anything that we can do to bolster our efforts there to reduce hate. The fact is there are 400 million guns in the United States and only about 380 million people. You cannot, as has already been said, have this conversation without addressing the prevalence and accessibility of firearms. That is what distinguishes the United States from all other countries, and it's why we have the level of firearm violence far beyond what other countries in this world have. It is true that Cain murdered Abel with a stone, but had Cain had access to assault weapons with their disintegrating and splintering bullets, the death would have been probably faster, more destructive, and more likely to injure anyone else that was around at the time. The increased lethality of weapons of death now, including the increased accessibility to those military-level firearms, is a bad combination that we are seeing playing out on a regular basis. It is a mix of hate and mental illness and crisis and access to guns and the nihilistic violence in and of itself, and I hate to say it, some copycat violence as well. I particularly appreciate the work of the Violence Prevention Center because of the evidence that they have put together, and we would do well to review their proposals also as we consider how to approach this on a holistic level, on a public health level. We all share the same goal, which is to reduce gun violence and deaths in Minnesota. And I hope that in our conversation on Wednesday, we can find the areas where we have common ground and we can maybe reach a little bit beyond our own, I don't want to call them blinders, but boundaries, I would say, of our approaches on these, and see if we can't find some common areas on proposals that might be a bit of a stretch for some of us as well. I think we are called upon in this moment to do just that on behalf of our people of Minnesota. With that, members, we are going to adjourn today's proceeding, and I look forward to our conversation Wednesday morning at 9 a.m. right here. Thank you, everyone.